let Pat go first, as we have a board chair who's slightly less than in perfect shape, I guess, so we'll get him in and out. But in the meantime, Peter, do you want to raise your question now? Do you want to raise it after the Pat question about the Monty Tech process, or?
Yeah, no, I have other public comment, but
You have other?
I will definitely ask that question.
Okay, so you have other public comment,
I
though,
do.
so you'd like to go ahead?
But I don't want to jump the gun here.
You can do whatever you like.
Well, we have,
Well, thank you.
usually open the meeting, haven't we?
I have,
Yeah,
yes,
she-
I have opened the meeting.
Excuse me.
So I have just two comments. My first comment is, as I outlined last week when I was participating remotely from a business trip in California, this is an issue that I also brought up this past week at the Selectmen's meeting, and I will continue to at this meeting until I think that it's been properly resolved. At this past week's Selectmen's meeting, Selectman Katie Adams had to participate remotely due to her children were sick and she had to care for them. And so she participated from this table using a cell phone that the town manager dialed into her. And she had to miss a vote at that meeting because she was unable to effectively hear the testimony that was happening from the lectern during the meeting, and the sound quality ebbed and flowed throughout the meeting. So, there are a lot of very important meetings in town that happen from this table, and I think that remote participation of members is something that the town needs to address. I have not heard back from the town technology director or the town manager since our conversation last Thursday. I'm anxiously anticipating their plan of action, and I will report back regularly at this meeting as to what I hear.
Okay.
My second comment is in working through minutes for this meeting and through reviewing various versions of budgets and target budgets and proposed budgets and PowerPoint presentations with annotations that were above and below targets. I'm finding myself at this point in the process, admittedly, first year at this, a bit confused and out of sorts as to where we're at with respect to the budget. And I would ask the assistance of the town manager and the town finance director that we need to look at standardization and regular updates, and ideally, what can we do to approach this perhaps from what we call in my industry a dashboard approach, which is, can we potentially consolidate this to a single page? Can we show what's changed between target, proposed, department requests above and below target, and specifically what are the natures of those requests above and below those targets? Right now, I think I would have to look at literally 15 different documents to be able to pull that together. And I would appreciate your assistance in doing so.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Any other public comment before we begin?
I'm all set.
No. Okay. All right, then, Steve, if you'd like to, we'll again start with the PAC.
My apologies. I didn't wish to be not well, so thank you.
Thank you for coming and talking to us despite
Well-
your,
This matters, so
it does, you're absolutely right.
if I could have got it on one page, I would have done.
Could I ask you if you could, despite your illness, if you could get the tip of that microphone closer to your mouth? That would be
Are we good there?
better.
Okay, public access cable. As a preamble, the PAC revenue comes into the town. It's restricted for PAC purposes and essentially does not affect the town budget. So the monies that come in, we use to run PAC, staff, expenses, studio equipment. The franchise fee from Compact Cast is the principal source of PAC expenses. And in addition, we now, with the change of the way the fund was structured last year, we get interest monthly from the funds. They are reserved for the new studio once we get the new space. The next page, my apologies, comes out rather small, but the important numbers, as usual, are at the bottom right-hand corner. I can address any of them if you wish. Being old, I have a bigger copy. I'm sorry if that's too small. So PAC expenses for operations, bottom right-hand corner, 191,000. PAC expenses for capital, there's 120,000 there. We're not expecting to spend that except for one of two things that may happen, one of which is catastrophic failure of some of our equipment that needs dealing with quickly, and the other is somebody giving us the new space for the studio so we can start work on that. The 191,000 is below our expected income for the year, and that's one thing we try and do every time, is to ensure our operations expenses are less than our income for the year. So there are salaries for the manager, being Joe, in my support here, and one benefited part-time employee. We don't have that employee yet. We're looking to see what we should do, and we don't know the real cost of such an employee because the medical expenses can vary quite wildly depending on if they even need it, if they're single, or if they have a family and 13 dependents and 3 dogs. So the studio space I mentioned, we have quite a lot of money put away. That's quite an expensive process. We are looking to bring a 3rd channel online this year, which will increase that slightly. We had our videographers as basically contractors, and we discovered we weren't allowed to do that. We didn't know that. So they've been converted to employees. So if you compare the big chart with the previous year, you will find the videographers are dealt with separately. So at the very top of the preceding slide, it's got 2 lines for salaries. One of them is for Joe and the part-timer when we find him or her, and the other is now salaries for videographers, which are part-time, unbenefited, and are sort of on demand.
Okay, and again, I'm having trouble reading the...
My apologies.
No, that's okay.
Can I give you the big sheet?
No, I'm good. I just want to make sure that, I'm going to assume that there's an offset in the consultant line that you used to have for paying
Yes,
them
we
from.
moved it. We
Okay,
killed
thank
the
you.
one. We have one person who is actually a 1099 contractor who runs the bulletin board.
Okay,
The difference is the others use our equipment, and as such, they have to be employees. She uses her own equipment, and she's on her own schedule.
okay,
So we have one left in there. So I think that's note 4 on here. The vendor expenses used to include the videographers. Now it just includes that one person.
okay, thanks.
Um,
John?
Excuse me for a minute.
Yes.
You referred to the $120,000
Yes.
as a figure you did not anticipate having, needing, but was there in case of equipment,
Catastrophic failure.
catastrophic failure?
Yep.
Okay. Is there any, do you have any balance from previous operating years?
Oh, we have, in fact, the next slide is a really good one.
There we go again. Excuse me.
It's the closest I could get to put the whole thing on one page, which I understand is a future charter of this committee. So the balance of the estimated at the end of financial year, the real balance at the end of FY20, $727,000. Now that looks like a lot of money, but it's being put on one side for a new studio, and that does cost a lot of money. So we have that sitting there. The operations number So it's how to run everything, small expenses, the videographers, salaries, 191,000. That includes the part-time employee we don't have yet. Capital 120, and the income 254,500 estimated for the year. So this is a summary of our budget. So
You're anticipating dipping into the balance 57,000 if you do have to spend a whole 120,000?
if we had to.
Right, if you had to, right.
What I didn't want is to, 3 days after the annual meeting, discover our major piece of equipment's failed and we have to wait 6 months for the next town meeting to get it approved. So we're just trying to be a little careful here.
Conversely, if you did not have to spend 120,000, your balance would be about 790,000 next year.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And your subscriber base is pretty stable?
Say again?
Your subscriber base, your base of
Well,
subscribers?
actually,
That's a few slides ahead.
there's another slide coming right up, but you're doing a great job of running me along
that's
here, which
fine.
I do appreciate.
Sorry for the
Could I-
interruption.
Just so that I'm clear on the logic here, otherwise my mind will not be able to move forward and I won't be able to pay attention to what you're going to say next. The $120,000 from capital, is this going to come from the general fund, or is
No.
this being allocated from your balance?
It's from our
sheet,
balance.
essentially? Okay.
We allocate nothing from the general fund.
Okay, understood. Out of curiosity, and stop me if you're going to get to this, what is your most expensive piece of equipment that would be considered a pacing item, where if it
The
failed,
one-
things
The one
stopped?
that did it to us a couple of years ago, and Joe probably knows better, was about 30,000 for the casters.
Yes, it was in the 20,000.
Yeah. That's the main server that captures all the video. I trust it's running and capturing this. And it's also the main server to send it out.
I think you just got to yell from the back room that it's working, so.
Well, at least they're awake now, that's good. So, catastrophic failure, I mean, if it caught fire or something, we lose all the pieces. We have audio equipment, video equipment, all sorts.
Okay, so this would be like a fire kind of
This
incident, where you'd
would
have a lot of equipment.
But it's also, if the building, if we get TC Passios dealt with and given our space, that would be enough to at least initiate the work. While that's being put together, then at the next town meeting, we'll have better numbers to say how much the studio would be.
Okay,
So,
Thank
but
you.
it's not real money in the sense of if we don't use it,
it's a reserve
goes back.
allocated from your enterprise
Right,
fund.
but it goes back into our revenue fund if we don't use it.
Okay.
So, are we good? We're good.
We're good.
Excellent. So I put some additional information here, which I was told you might like to know. That'll help you understand how stable our incoming funding is. Cable cutting and subscriber fees ends up in the press from time to time. I've got some numbers on subscribers. The FCC rulemaking that may change how much money comes to us, and also something about streaming video, which is another situation. So I took the Comcast fees for the last 4 quarters, which were round about 50,000, and I tried to work out the reduction. So in the whole year of 2019, they went down by about 2.5%. We don't have enough information to understand quite how it went down, because cable subscribers may reduce their service and still be a subscriber, or new ones can come on board when we have a new development in the town, or different people move in. So this is the number that comes to us, and it's 5% of their gross video service fees, and that's the way the FCC ruling has been set since 1984, I think. If you turn the page, you will find out the number of subscribers. So in 2016, these are numbers we can actually get hold of, 3,350. The subscriber in this case tends to be a home. Okay, so it may be multiple people there, but there's one subscription. 2017, it went up by 1%. 2018, it went up by 0.5%. According to the press, this is wrong, because we should be going down. So
There's
we're
new
on-
growth.
I'm sorry?
There's been new growth in Lunenburg over that period of time,
Absolutely,
so it's
yeah. So
compensated.
I can't quantify that particularly because I don't have those numbers. But this goes to 2018, which are the latest available numbers. Statewide, from 2015, 2018, there was a drop of 7%. But they are very different populations. I mean, if you look what's happening in Boston or in Cambridge,
younger.
they can be very, very different people. So they may even understand how to do streaming video. The next one has the FCC rulemaking. This is the franchise fee rules, which the FCC, under pressure from the NCTA, National Cable Television Association, were pushing them to change. This happened on August the 1st of last year, and they managed to get the FCC to let them count monetary and in-kind benefits at market value. Now, what that can mean depends on how you're structured. We have, I believe, 23 free drops around the town. For instance, the safety building has a number, I think. The school has one. We actually have two in the studio, so we can see what's going on. They're called courtesy drops. They, under this ruling, can start to say, those have this value, market value, and therefore we're going to take that out of the money that we're paying you. We're presently at the maximum of 5%. We were at 2.5% in the previous contract. We're now at 5%. They may also be able to include some head-end equipment that's specific for our upstream channels. Does not include capital costs. We got a capital infusion when the contract was signed, which was $180,000, 170 maybe, something like that. That was 2 years ago. But it's not clear if the market value of channels would be included. And channels, if we had high-definition channels, they could charge almost anything they like for them because they're commercially valuable. We have standard definition channels at the moment. We have no idea if they will do that. They're not going to at the moment, but it's not precluded that they will start to do that. Now, Senator Markey and Representative Eshoo from California, I believe, filed a Protecting Community Television Act. Markey is very much a communications person. He's been involved in telecommunications different ways for many, many years. And this is to ensure community television operations continue to receive the resources they need to educate and inform viewers in the communities they serve. A delightful phrase. That's exactly what we try to do here. So I kind of like that one. Now, one other activity that's going on, this is only in Massachusetts. It's been done elsewhere. It's a fee on using the rights of way. This is where the Comcast franchise fee is what it comes from originally. A fee on using rights of way for delivering streaming video services. Because what's happening, people are moving a lot of channels off cable. They're not even subscribing to cable necessarily, and they're getting them through Hulu and Amazon Prime and all sorts of other things. So basically, they're operating the same business a different way and avoiding the franchise fee by doing it that way. The monies would be collected at the state level. This is a different process altogether, and dispersed based on population. So if Lunenburg's growing, that's a good thing. Other states and municipalities throughout the country have already successfully imposed these fees. The bill has 74 co-sponsors, which includes both Senators Markey and Warren. And the FCC's order does not preempt, restrict, or overrule this bill. So legal advice says we can still do this. So the coalition of all the PACs for all the towns, which is a group called Mass Access, are pursuing this.
Okay, just to clarify then, this digital streaming bill would affect monies collected. So if Comcast was billing for internet service as the right-of-way?
I'm quite how they do it. It really is for streaming video, so they will have to go to Comcast.
Would go to
They'll have to know what's,
Hulu, YouTube, the
Amazon.
streaming companies.
not your email and things like that.
Yeah.
No, I know that. I just,
Okay.
and I understand that it's for streaming, things like,
Yes.
yeah, Hulu, and I wasn't sure how that billing, how that funding would then find its way back here.
The
So it'd be
state,
through Comcast, through bills
right,
to,
state would bill, whichever way they work it. Comcast, Verizon, everybody serving all, RCN, is that another one? I think it is. Charter, all these people around. The state would collect the money.
Yep.
And then they would disperse it, town or city, depending on population. The intent is to try and make sure that whatever we were getting before, we get about the same.
This is just government keeping up with innovation, right? Like, if you recall, when e-commerce first happened, it was tax-free. There was no sales tax
Right,
on
right.
online sales.
Right.
Until the state caught up with it, right?
Well,
This is
also-
effectively the same thing, right?
right. Well, to me, it's also, I'm just looking at it, it's, like, I'm not the only one taking a hit for providing streaming of live stream of town meetings to
Yeah.
people at home, if that's how they're getting them, is that, because I pay a fee through cable, so
Right.
I can have the
Right.
public channel.
But
that-
right now, you're subsidizing my content.
Yeah.
Because
Exactly.
you're a Comcast subscriber and I'm not.
Right.
But I watch them on YouTube.
Well, right, well, there's on YouTube, and there's also people who do not have cable who
Right.
look for the live stream, so, yep. So that.
So thank
that
you,
part's
by the
good.
way, for
Yes,
those
you're
things.
welcome, yes. Anything I can do to help out, I'm sorry.
Steve,
Yes.
any idea how much, you see the money's collected at the state level dispersed based on population? That means that Lunenburg would be on the hook for, or be dispersed at the rate of, at the value of $11,000 people in Lunenburg divided by the population of the state. Do you know how much that dispersal would be? Any
I
idea?
don't even know what the percentage might end up being as a starting point, and I assume there are auditors around that'll make sure everybody gets their appropriate share, but I don't know that either, I'm sorry. This is still in its very early stages.
It's at least one step removed from the number of subscribers you have, the Lunenburg Public Access has then. It's,
Say again,
it
sir?
is removed, one step removed from the number of subscribers Lunenburg Public Access has.
Oh,
It's
right.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Right, and then basically then, just to go back to.
Sure.
The 5% fee
Yes,
has already been in effect, is that correct?
yes, we're
Right.
getting that. That's the 50,000 per quarter roughly.
Okay, so if it's 50,000 per quarter, and we're anticipating, you have as your income 254,000, how did you arrive at that
Oh,
number?
I'm sorry, there's 1,000 a month of interest coming from the revenue account, that's another 12,000. This year, we have, I think this month, we're supposed to get the last of our capital contributions, which is 42,500.
Okay, so the, if I were to look at your operations number at 191, then the amount of income that you have coming in that would support
It's
that,
2012. I mean...
200. 212,000?
Miracles.
212,000, okay.
212,000, I'm sorry, I'm not firing on all cylinders.
That's okay.
You're doing good.
We'll-
That's
We'll
okay,
we'll try
you're
not to
fine.
keep you too much longer. Does anybody else have any questions for Steve?
I have a few
I'm
more
sorry.
questions, yeah. You mentioned the third channel, and I think that came up in a selectmen's meeting or something recently on this topic.
Oh, it did? Okay.
Can you explain what the purpose is of the third channel and
Yeah,
what benefit that will bring?
typical three channels that most PACs have is the public one, where the public can do their own productions, cooking shows, baseball shows, for instance.
Yep.
Education, which is anything to do with education, so maybe materials coming from different PACs or different places, as well as school events and sports and things like that. and government, which is the one we're running on right now. So meetings, town meetings, anything like that would go on the government one. It's the way it was originally structured when the thing was put together in, I believe, 1984.
And we currently run 2 channels.
We currently run 2. We used to have only one 20 years ago, which is
I
where it
recall,
started
yeah.
from.
So today, the educational and public are essentially consolidated?
Yes.
Is that more or less what's happening?
And government is kept separate.
And are you,
The public and education are together on one channel right now. And
Typically,
government
the
is kept separate.
education is put, if it's a committee meeting relating to the school, it goes on the government
Okay.
channel. If it's a school event, it goes on the.
community channel? Okay. For people who didn't hear at home, what she explained was, I'm sorry, I don't know if you were aware, but we're being broadcast over public access cable.
Oh, really?
What she just explained was that school committee meetings, for example, public meetings are broadcast over the government channel versus something about sporting events or the superintendent's roundtable perhaps, or that
Yeah.
sort of thing would go over the community channel.
Right.
Is there a shortage of inventory of available time on that channel at this point?
Actually, Joe has just started looking into what's available on that, because this would be a significant step for us to do this. Also, Comcast, in the contract, is entitled to take a channel back if you don't occupy it properly.
Oh, okay.
We do fill empty space with the bulletin board, but that doesn't really count. I mean, there's always something there. But we want, as we move on, to get more videos, more videographers. We will like to get more meetings covered when we have the staff to do it. So-
And is there either a additional cost and/or revenue opportunity associated with expansion?
The cost to us basically is a one-time cost, round about $7,000, to change some equipment and add some equipment in the control room here to feed that. The first step of it's already been done. The transmitter has been put in and one for us, so we now have our end beginning to be set up. But the Castus, our most expensive piece of equipment, has to be expanded from 2 channels to 3 channels. It's designed for that. It's plug-in pieces, but you have to buy
So
it.
that's equipment, but are there additional operating expenses that you anticipate? by
Only
doing?
in terms of if we're doing more programming.
So that's variable based on available funds?
It's right.
Okay. Can we talk about streaming for a minute? So you publish most of your content on YouTube, I believe.
Did you want? Use the microphone. I won't stand close.
Yes, our own produced programs are put onto YouTube
Okay.
and also meetings.
And there was a period of time this year when the live streaming capability basically went dark. And
Yes.
then it came back, but it seems to be intermittent, and I'm curious about that service.
Right. I brought it back about a month ago or so, and then YouTube gave us a warning, basically a slap on the wrist for violating community guidelines, and I appealed it, and it didn't go anywhere. They rejected the appeal. So I'm not sure what we're going to do at this point, unless I can get a real human body at YouTube. I don't know how I can rectify that. So we're not sure we're going to continue to live stream.
So if I could humbly make a couple of recommendations, and perhaps I interpreted it wrong, but my understanding is one of the reasons we ran into issues 6 or 8 months ago was because we were running the stream on a constant basis and therefore rebroadcasting commercial music, which we got dinged for.
That's typically the YouTube issue.
Right, which the obvious answer to that is don't stream when you're running, when you're running the crawler or the bulletin board. But secondly, there are alternative services to YouTube for streaming, and I understand that they're not necessarily free. But we're living in a period where you've just articulated that there will be funding sources coming from places other than Comcast. We have a population that is migrating from Comcast to other cord-cutting-based services. I happen to live in a part of town that is serviced by Verizon, so I'm not a Comcast customer.
Yes, you mean,
Yes,
but no video.
correct, correct. So my point is that I think that that's something that we ought to be planning for and budgeting for in the future, if at all possible.
We are aware of other PACs, we're still trying to, this has only just come up in the last few days, who actually live stream through their own website.
Yep.
And that might be a good solution for us.
It's not going to be free to do it right.
Don't
but-
have a clue how to do it yet,
Right.
because it only came up a few days ago. So once, if we abandon YouTube, then we will look for another.
Yeah, I mean, YouTube's great for on-demand content. I think it serves us very well. My last is just a comment, which is, I think that we as a town need to be thinking about this and paying close attention to some of the legislation that is in the works here. This is a service that is essential to democracy in 2020. There are no reporters in the room right now, I don't believe. 20 years ago, there will probably be a reporter in this room during budget season from the Sentinel and the Telegram. And the Ledger, for that matter. I think the Ledger was here then. So this is essential for people to be informed about what's going on. And to whatever extent possible, I think it's incumbent upon the town to support this as best we can.
You just described our charter, thank you.
Glad to do it. I'm a big supporter.
Any other comments, questions
Thank you, John.
for Pat? No, we're good? Steve, thank you very much.
You need anything else? We're good.
No, I think you're good. I think you,
Warrants are on the back page.
yeah,
The third
the
one
warrants look familiar, and then, yes, the one on the employee.
for the employees, but that's been done by the personnel committee now.
Yep, that makes sense. All right, thank you very
I
much.
appreciate you letting me
Thank you,
go.
Steve.
Thank you.
Okay. Did you want to raise your question before we hear from Money Tech, or do you want to wait until we hear from Money Tech and then discuss it at that point?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll raise the questions now. Again, I'm going to play the new guy card.
Okay, and actually, as you're playing the new guy card, before the meeting started, Heather distributed an updated budget, which is not that, the piece of paper that you just covered.
This one. This one.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and actually, I should let everybody know that basically that updated budget incorporates the changes to Monty Tech.
Okay.
And
What is the line number on that?
that's the schools line, so it would be we're above library, so schools and library over on the right-hand side, on this one.
Wrong sheet.
And then over here to the right, so there's an adjustment made, and the adjustment, the other adjustment made on that goes to what we currently had as the overage, or the remaining balance, the unexpended, or the unappropriated.
So, just so that I understand, we moved from 22,130 and change in schools to 22,222, and that is to account for, in part, the change in the Monotech assessment? I'm seeing nodding, so I'll take that as a yes. And those funds were moved from where?
We had the $135,000 that was remaining in the budget to be
unexpended.
appropriated. Right.
Right.
So she adjusted that number
Yes.
at the bottom right.
So we had an unallocated balance in the second to the furthest column of 135, 130. Plugging in the new, the Monty Tech assessment number brings the unallocated balance to $63,040. And if you're looking for the line item detail, I also provided a line item budget.
What line item is that?
I'll tell you in a minute. Page 10,
Page 10?
and it is 312 on that page.
Say again?
312.
312?
312.
Yep.
Okay.
Hey, Heather.
Thank you.
Is it safe to say that this document is the most updated budget document with all the figures that we've been getting emails on?
Yes,
Okay.
Okay.
it is.
Good.
So my question, and perhaps the town manager is the best person to address this, that I relayed to both the town manager and the chair via email today. I actually have a number of questions regarding the timing of the Monty Tech assessment, which I may or may not get to right now. But I'm curious about the mechanics of the Monty Tech assessment with respect to the town meeting process. In the past, it's been my experience when the town has had an issue with the Monty Tech assessment, we have on occasion voted to underfund that line, which effectively works as a veto vote against the Monty Tech budget. Is that still an effective process, or are there other means of addressing if we believe that this is something that is outside of our capabilities?
Well, it would require, the assessment requires 2/3 of the communities to accept the assessment. And that's out of 18 towns, correct? So, and a couple of the towns have multiple members on the school committee based on population, so Gardner and Fitchburg. So it's all it would have to be rejected, essentially.
But is this
the
a function
assessment.
of a town meeting vote or a vote of the Monty Tech School Committee?
Okay,
Town meeting.
right, town meeting could vote to not approve it, but if 12 districts voted to approve it,
We are overridden.
then we have to, right, so I think to your point, the setting up so that there is some sort of reserve to cover,
Right, if we would
Sure.
potentially underfund it, but then create a reserve or something.
right, and I will say that, and Tammy would have a lot of information about this after going through this for several years. I'm not sure if by the time it comes to our town meeting, it may be moot.
Maybe moot point.
Because of the timing of different votes.
Okay.
So, and I think that's happened in the past, too, that, we can say no as a town, but if it's already past 12 districts, then we're still there. So I think that if we went to town meeting with a budget, and there was a recommendation to vote no on that particular number, then somewhere in the budget, so that we didn't have to come back for another town meeting, there would have to be a reserve line. Is that correct?
Right, or
Okay.
set aside.
Okay.
Because, well, we'd still have to go to town meeting to transfer from one account to another.
So we would still need to have a second town meeting in order to do that?
Responsible budgeting, effectively.
Okay. So that, but basically well, I guess we could talk about the timing of that, but that would be probably a better question for Tammy
Yep.
than as she's presenting. But more on that? or-
So I'm sorry, you started to talk about the proportionality of the seats on the Monty Tech School Committee, and I think you were getting to
Their vote.
proportional votes from the towns. Is that
Right.
more or less what you're leading into? So
When they vote on the budget.
we don't actually have 1/12 of the voting power, we have something less than that. Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right, Monty Tech. Good evening, Dr. Harity. How are you?
Sheila Harity, I'm the superintendent at Monty Tech. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. We have actually 18 communities, and Fitchburg has 4 representatives, and Gardner has 2, and the rest of the communities have 1.
Okay, thank you.
It's based on the percentage of students at our school.
Okay.
Right. So we wanted to give you some high points of what's happening at our school. The first slide, and I'll just quickly go through it because obviously we really need to get to the nuts and bolts of the budget, but want to share some of our successes. At this point, we have a 97.2% graduation rate. It did fall slightly. We have 9 students that didn't graduate, but I am happy to share that the students didn't drop out of Monty Tech, that they're actually in their 5th year at our school. The next slide shows that we have a 0.1% dropout rate for this past year as well. The third slide shows that every year we continue to apply for the Skills Capital Grant, and Katie Whitaker does an outstanding job writing grants for Monty Tech, and we were able to receive $495,000 to start a automation, robotics, and mechatronic lab, where we combined the electrical program, the engineering program, computer-aided design, and the following slides are some of the pictures. Monty Tech was actually one of the schools that the governor and lieutenant governor wanted to highlight in the Commonwealth STEM Week to showcase really the cutting-edge STEM learning that's happening at Monty Tech. First slide is the ribbon cutting with the lieutenant governor, and second slide actually shows the pictures of the students in the various workstations creating the PLCs, which are really exciting. The next slide after that, we also received a $384,000 Skills Capital Grant in our health occupation and our auto technology program. And we received, the bottom left picture is actually an animatage table, which is an entire computerized table, full length, the size of a human being. And it tilts up and it shows the skeleton, the muscle skull structure and so forth. And it's 3D and can be spun and looked in all different areas. Nice thing too, you can use it for dogs and cats and other things as well. So it's multidimensional. In addition, we're able to receive out of the 300.
I just wanted to make sure both grants completely paid for the equipment?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful,
Yes.
thank you.
So the $180,000 was for the health, for the animatage table, the exam table rooms, and some mannequin. And we have the entire list of the grant dollars that were paid for there, and a $204,000 auto tech grant. We've partnered with Snap-on Tools, and we've gotten NC3 automotive scanning diagnostic certification tools and floor jacks and auto lifts and so forth, which is great. We're always trying to maximize our budget and then enhance it, because as you're well aware, it's so expensive to run a vocational school and the equipment is so expensive. Anything that we can do to continue to supplement that, we want to do that. Another happy, great news is every year we come and tell you about our veterinary clinic. So the next update I'd love to share with you is that the clinic is open for families that can't afford proper animal care for their pet. And we partnered with VCA, and they're actually paying $100,000, and they gave us their medical director to run our clinic. And with VCA, they're one of the largest veterinary clinic owners in our country, and they actually have tons of sponsors for medical prescriptions and diagnostics and so forth that have also, we've been able to partner with them as well, and that's why the families will be only paying approximately 25% of the cost of veterinary care for their pets.
What qualifies a family to participate in that program?
If you qualify for food stamps,
Okay.
you have the EBT card. So in addition to that, we have the exam rooms open for wellness exams on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and surgeries are open on Tuesday, and Fridays is, we have a dental suite in there as well, and the dental procedures are performed.
Your students in that program become certified vet techs? Is
Vet
that-
assistants.
Vet-
So that's a
vet
great
assistants.
question. So they become vet assistants. We actually talked Mount Wachusett Community College into starting an associate's degree, and our students can go on to the Mount and get a vet tech certification. And we partnered with Becker College, and our teachers worked out a 12-credit dual enrollment opportunity. If our students want to go on to become a veterinary doctor, they can take those 12 credits with them. Pretty exciting.
That's cool.
And at the same time, here we are helping our community with much-needed veterinary service. So in addition to that, not only is co-op is obviously very important to us, we're training our students to enter the workforce, either upon high school or after graduation. And they can go on to obviously their college and extend their educational training and then into the world of work. But while they're with us at Monty Tech, if you're qualified for co-op, you can actually work with a company, get interviewed at our school, and get placed. And I'm really happy to share that Peach Column in February is at 145. We have 145 juniors and seniors out on co-op, which is the largest number Monty Tech has ever had. We're thrilled that our students, instead of being at Monty Tech during their vocational week, are working in industry, getting paid, building their resumes, refining their skills, and potentially earning themselves a full-time job upon graduation. And I'm happy to share they're making between $12.75 and $20 an hour. Not bad for a 16, 17-year-old student.
What is your enrollment?
We're at $14.35 approximately. It dips a little bit lower at this point, but that's always our point. The students, this will continue to grow because you might be looking at the numbers. Students in the junior class do not qualify for co-op till their second semester.
Okay.
So it's second semester juniors and full-time seniors. Another thing that we're very proud of is we have a motivational event series that we've done for 6 years at Monty Tech, and this year we had Erin Gruwald from Freedom Writers. She came to us, we watched the movie as a school, and then she came and spoke to our students about really reaching their full potential and really being inspired by her story as a teacher in California and the struggles and the importance of acceptance and helping people in your community, especially those that that need your help and need a hand up, which was great. The students really took to her message. She was actually at her school for an hour and a half, and the students were just lined up, just wanting to continue the conversation. Monty Tech does not close their doors after the high school buses roll out. I'm really proud to share with you that we have 1,700 adults in training and retraining programs in our evening program. The school is open Monday through Thursday till 10 o'clock at night. So there's approximately 1,000 adults actually in industry-recognized courses that are receiving the industry credentials, and so that they can either rejoin the workforce or continue up the career ladder. We've added 3 different sections of welding, construction supervisor. We have 250 adults in the plumbing and electrical journeyman apprenticeship programs, so the place is buzzing in the evening as well. And you might have heard, too, that the governor is earmarking more dollars directly to adults wanting to go back to vocational schools with the idea of they've just spent so much money supporting these skills grants with this very expensive equipment. They want us to stay open, which we already have been doing it for many years.
Can you, at a very high level, and by the way, I've actually participated in some of your continuing education
Nice.
short programs.
Yes.
They're great.
Thank you.
How does the funding work for those? I mean, obviously, there are fees that the students pay to participate in
Correct.
those. I would imagine there's some state money and some of your, how does that work?
Yeah, so no, it's not state-funded.
Okay.
That it actually is run by, we actually pay the instructors based on the class size and what the potential going rate of teaching a particular course is.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a few years that we were actually losing money. And we got a firecracker director that, and with full support from our school committee and our administration, that really turned the program around. And we're actually going to be putting in a truck driving. That's the next
Oh,
one.
wow.
It's huge. The
great.
number of truck drivers, there's such a massive shortage that we're in the process of working that out, and it's coming very soon.
So does that program operate in the black, in the red?
It's in the black now.
Okay.
Yeah, for the last several years. But when I first got there, it was limping along with maybe about 600 adults. A lot of it was, we're in culinary and we were making gingerbread houses. And
Yeah.
there was some,
Which is fun.
obviously, it was great. But we really wanted to ramp up the training and retraining programs, and she's done an outstanding job.
About how many adults do you, on average, serve. Let's define adults as being post-high school age.
Yes.
So is it like a third of the student body, or how many adults usually take programs there?
In the adults are the
Adults.
evening program.
Okay, evening program.
It is the evening program it's at Monty Tech, but it's not connected through our vocational program.
Okay.
And they're not receiving a high school diploma. They're receiving industry-recognized credentials. They're based on semesters or depending on how many hours those industry credentials are saying you need X amount of classroom instruction or hands-on experience.
All right,
Pretty exciting.
thanks.
So the other piece is, we wrote a grant for $80,000. There's a safety grant that was coming out from the state that we're able to get a few more exit doors as well as a gate for security so that people can't get in the back of the building without access through it. We also wanted to share with you, and I believe Tammy had given you the short version. We can certainly send it to you electronically as well. Monty Tech is 50 years old. We talked with the school committee because I think our school district has done an incredible job maintaining the facility and keeping up with the updates that have been needed. But at the same time, it's still a 50-year-old facility. The plumbing, electrical, and so forth are 50 years old. There's only so much the paint can do, and I also have to credit our vocational instructors in our programs because many of the maintenance projects were done truly by our students. But we were able to get support from our school committee to hire DRA. We put it out, and they came and gave us a evaluation of our school, and they came last spring through the summer, and this fall they gave us a draft report, which we released to school committee last night at our full committee. And just to bring you through some of again, we gave you a shorter version, and we can give you the electronic version as well. They broke out many of the pieces of this at a high, medium, and low priorities. And the third sheet, I'll bring your attention to. So at the bottom, DRA is saying that Monty Tech should start fixing the things that they listed as high, which are in red, within the next 1 to 3 years, and that's $3,689,000. The medium is 3 to 8 years, that's $7,500,000 approximately, and ongoing major renovations would be $4,500,000. If we were to consider a major renovation, DRA estimated it approximately at $113 million. And the other number right below it is they thought for a 320,000 square foot facility, it'd be $160 million. Certainly, we're not coming to you tonight asking for any type of proposal. We just thought it was important, as this building is getting older and we're dealing with more internal issues, it was important to at least have an assessment done of the facility and begin the conversation. So that's what we're doing with you tonight. So with that, I'd love Tammy to come up and go through the budget with you, unless you have any other questions for me.
Before you leave the microphone, I'd like to ask if, back in January at the MMA concert, the governor and his people from the budgeting office were toting the, and I had the terminology just a second ago, student opportunity program that the state has funded. Do you see that putting more pressure on your school, or is it going to be able to be blended in without a...
The Student Opportunity Act, that's
Yes.
actually Tammy's first slide.
Oh,
What a
Okay.
great
I'll wait for
lead-in. This is wonderful. Thank you.
fantastic,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Just one more thing regarding the three priorities, the high, medium, low.
Yes.
Well, just the high and the medium, actually. In the next 8 years, it looks like Monty Tech will be needing something around $11 million worth of repairs. Is that some surcharge that comes to the member communities that Monty Tech supports?
At this point, our school committee, we literally just gave them the report. It was in the subcommittee for capital improvement.
Okay.
We had spoken with DRA. We had a conference call with members of MSBA, to at least start hearing about the different options. One was the accelerated repair, but Monty Tech had already taken on the bulk of that, and it wouldn't make sense to just do the windows and the boiler.
Sure.
Because now you can't go back to them for decades, otherwise they're going to subtract it. It wouldn't be a smart investment, at least I believe. We haven't really fully vetted that out through the school committee. We just had a small conversation last evening. But then, full building, they even showed us the stats with so many schools attempting to put in as a statement of interest. I believe it was 66 school districts in Massachusetts, and only 11 were invited in to even entertain the thought before they went out to assess their building. So this was way before we even are at that point. We wanted to use this as a roadmap, and every year when we come to you, and Tammy will show it in the budget, we have capital improvement. And as I had mentioned earlier, Monty Tech has done a wonderful job continuing to chip away at various components, and we continue to do that, and that is our plan. And now with this report, we're trying to be more strategic. As Tammy will go through it, one of them is a generator. Well, it's a 50-year-old generator that's almost on its last leg right now. So that is a smart investment for us. So even when, at some point down the road, I don't know when, if we were to ever get a new building, I'm not even going to say a time, we would be able to take that generator and place it in the new building. And so we're trying to be strategic. If there's high priorities, no matter what, that need to be done, we absolutely will be doing those.
So at
And we'll
least
just be chipping those away, using this as the list.
So this actually doesn't differ that much from normal standard operations and will be addressed by your capital budget?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yes. That's just short answer. I could have come up with that one. I apologize.
I just want to make sure I understood it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're good over here? Yep. We're good over here? Okay, thanks, Tammy.
One of these days, we're going to switch places, and I'm going to talk about all the fun stuff
Get the
we
easy
do at
part.
Monty Tech. Okay, here's the fun part. The FY 2021 House 2 preliminary budget. This implements, as you pointed out, the first year of the Student Opportunity Act. So what is it? It's the new Mass General Law that they just adopted, and they're establishing an education fund that they are hoping to improve educational opportunities for all students. And they're committed to funding this over a 7-year phased-in period, and it comes with some criteria. They're going to be increasing certain aspects of the foundation budget, which I'll show you in another slide. Specifically for benefits, we always know they've been underfunding that piece of the foundation budget for years. Guidance and psychological services with the increase of social, emotional well-being and health. Those are areas they are looking to increase. Special ed, out-of-district tuition, which of course we know is always underfunded. English learners and low-income students. So those are specifically the pieces of the foundation budget they'll be looking to make investments into. With this, schools are required to provide DESE no later than April 1st of this year with a 3-year evidence-based plan on how the district will use the Student Opportunity Act funds to close opportunity and achievement gaps for students in subgroups. And the requirements they're doing, there's a short form and a long form. They're basing it on the funding you're getting, and they're straight up using your additional Chapter 70 funding, your increase in 21 over 20, to determine which method, which form, a little more in depth in the long form, that you have to do. Monty Tech is a short form, because we're only getting $230,000 increase in Chapter 70.
What does that represent as a percentage from your previous Chapter 70?
Yep. Let me tell you. Sorry. $1.49%.
Wow.
So you can see I put the numbers that the total Chapter 70 that the investment by the state is putting in. So if we're supposed to commit a lot of our SOA funds to this 3-year evidence-based plan on how we're going to close opportunities and achievement gaps, what is Monty Tech's plan? So that's the next slide. Really, this year, we're focusing on really serving our ELL, our English Language Learners students. We're noticing through looking at the data that they are not testing, they're not having the same level of success on state-level testing as some of their peers. So we want to focus on this. So you can see by this next slide, we've provided you some data on that. In the spring of 2018, when the ELLs took the access test, they showed only 22% of them made progress towards English proficiency. And in spring of 29, only 36% of them showed progress. And then looking at MCAS results, spring 2019, for the next gen MCAS, only 33% of our EL students earned a proficiency score of meeting expectations in both English and math. So again, this is the area we are going to be focusing on. And going to the next slide, you'll see the budget. Again, I told you our increase in Chapter 70 is 230, 320. The difference in how the government is treating SOA funds as opposed to other grant-type funds like special ed, the 240 grant, Perkins, Title I, those types of grants. When you get funding for those grants, you have to supplement those funds to your budget. So in other words, you have to pay for things outside of what you normally would pay for in your budget. So it's a supplement to it, it's above and beyond. With these funds, they're allowing you to supplant. So big difference. And really, I will say, the reason why they're allowing people to supplant is some districts are only getting the additional $30 per kid increase for the SOA funds. So they might only have $10,000. 15, 20,000 additional dollars. How are you writing a 3-year evidence-based plan with those additional dollars to do what you need to do to achieve the results?
And I think that's where Lunenburg is falling, but I would also just ask you to, for the sake of people who are watching this, explain the difference between supplant and supplement.
Yes, so supplant is you can use funds that you're already spending in your budget, in other grants. You're already doing the program, you're already spending the dollars. Those can count towards your requirement of spending. Supplementing would be, we would have to take this additional 230 and do something completely outside of our normal spending that we're doing currently.
Thank you.
In a couple of the items on this list, a couple are supplement and a couple are supplant. One of the things we're doing is we currently have a 0.5 FTE ESL instructor. We are making that instructor a 1.0. So that is an increase to our budget because we're adding a 0.5 FTE. So that is the supplement part of this. We are going to also add an ESL paraprofessional. This is not an ad at this point. We currently have 8 paraprofessionals, and we're reorganizing and looking to see if one of them can become the ESL paraprofessional, if we feel they're qualified, and they, with some professional development, will help. So at that point, we're still in the process of analyzing the data. ESL teacher for our Summer Academy program. Our Summer Academy program is where we have students come in over the summer and they get additional MCAS supports. So we have teachers there, they're doing fun activities, but all surrounding improving their MCAS scores. So we're going to add the ESL instructor to those activities as one of the teachers. That's a supplement because we'll have to pay additional, and that's an hourly, however many hours they work over the summer. We also have special ed co-teachers. Well, several of our EL students are also special needs. We already do special education co-teaching. It's quite effective. We have great results with that. And that is when 2 teachers, there's 2 people in there teaching to students differently. That we already do. So that will just be supplemental and just looking, are we doing it effectively for the ELs, reviewing the program. Instructional technologist. We currently have this position in our budget, and it's half of that position is funded through Title I. So again, just having this person look at what's next on the list, assistive technology, that she thinks will, in working with the teacher, to see what she finds would be useful for supports for these students to help assist them. And last, professional development. Again, we already do that, but just enhancing it for co-teaching, EL, and SEI. The next slide is a breakdown of the foundation budget rates. I told you on slide 1 that the state is looking to increase certain lines within the foundation budget. So I felt it was important for you to see what those lines are in the foundation budget and understand how they factor into our entire budget. And oftentimes we get the questions or we get the comments or the concerns, well, why is vocational education getting more money? Why is it? Well, if you look, it's the most, besides special education, it's the most expensive education. If you look on the foundation budget rates, you'll see each category going down the left, preschool, kindergarten, et cetera, down through vocational. As the older the student gets, the more expensive the education. So they give more money on each of the top categories, administration, instructional leadership, et cetera, et cetera. And you'll see if you compare vocational, which is the high school, to the high school line below it, the amounts, the $399.73, is the amount they attribute of per pupil to that line, to that category. So we're the same there, in administration, $399.73. Instructional leadership, they expect the cost to be the same. Classroom and specialist teachers, they allot vocational districts more funding per student for teachers. Well, we might have a classroom shop of 30 students, but there could be 2 or 3 teachers in there, as opposed to the one academic teacher, for safety reasons, for different grade levels are within the shops. So hence, they allow you more funding for that. Other teaching services, again, the same. PD, slightly different. They expect that we're doing some different advanced trainings for people in the shops. Instructional materials and equipment, of course, that would probably make sense. You just heard from Dr. Harity how expensive things are in a shop. So yes, an academic textbook series or classroom of computers is very expensive. We buy those. But on top of that, we might have a shop with $1 million or $2 million worth of equipment in it because a CNC lathe is $150,000 or $200,000 and there's 5 of them in a room, as well as other things. So that's where that additional funding comes into play. Guidance and psychological, same. Pupil services, same. The next 2, operations and maintenance, and employee benefits and fixed charges. Vocational schools get a little more there because they're independent regions. And in a lot of instances, the towns pick up the cost, some of the costs. I know you allocate them out, but you pick up the cost of plowing, sanding, parks or recreation or lawn care. You allocate them back out to the schools, but vocational districts pay for them all. Those are all the expenses we must include in our budget, as well as benefits. Towns often hold the benefits and then charge off the schools to theirs or allocate those out. And again, vocationals pay for them all. When you take all those across, you see those all total the $14,954.65, which is the per pupil baseline for vocationals. So if you're looking at our foundation budget report as a vocational, and then you're comparing it to Lunenburg Public Schools, and you're seeing there's kindergarten kids, there's elementary students, there's pre-Ks, et cetera, you can see the amounts per kid, 4,000, 4,100, 8,300, 9. So that's why the foundation budgets are smaller per student in a comprehensive district as opposed to a vocational. The other items below it, special ed, ELs, low income, those are all considered items that are above. They're called above base. So everything from vocational up is your baseline. Everything above that is above base. So the students are counted twice. So we get credit for all our vocational students. They get 14,000. Then the state does a assumed percentage of how many special ed students you have. I'll show you that on the next slide. And they give you an additional 27,000 towards those, for those students. If you have tuitioned out, again, that's another assumed percentage. Vocational, we don't have those students because you either come to Monty Tech or you don't. And then low income, or ELs, again, you get credit for each of your ELs above base. And then low income, that's students who are considered economically disadvantaged. And in the past, you referred to it as free and reduced lunch students. They're economically disadvantaged, low income. And based on the percentage of students you have in your school who fall in this category, you fall into a category, we fall into low-income category 6, the 30 to 35.99, because we have 31%. So for each of those pupils, you get an additional $4,300. So if you look to the next slide, you'll see this in a visual, and I think it makes a lot more sense when you see it this way. This is Monty Tech's foundation budget report. We have 1,452 vocational students that are counted in our foundation enrollment. So again, definition of foundation enrollment, students that come to Monty Tech who live in our district. Students who live in our district that attend other vocational schools, otherwise known as school choice. Or we also have a Chapter 74 evening program for practical nursing that those pupils get counted in there as vocational. So then they literally just take those, multiply them by the rates for each category that I showed you on the previous page, and that's how you get the total of 21,714,152. Then you move over on the other side of the black line, and you'll see special ed in district. Again, I told you that's an assumed percentage. We have 225 special ed students in our district, not 70. But if you look down on the legend, it's about the third down, it says, special ed in district enrollment is an assumed percentage, representing 3.82% of K to 12, non-vocational, and 4.82% of vocational enrollment. So again, that's well under the numbers that a non-vocational school has and well under the numbers that a vocational school has. But nonetheless, that's above the base, so that's that $27,000 number per pupil that we just saw on the previous slide. For us, you move over to our column 12, our ELs, under the high school vocational. We have 15 ELs that we had as of October 1. Again, that's the above base. You can see the totals that were applied to each category on the previous slide. Low income, same concept. We have 449. They get the 4,300 approximately per pupil, and that's how you get that. You add everything over, that's where the $25,602,266 comes from, otherwise known as our required net school spending number. Foundation budget, required net school spending. Required net school spending is the minimum amount that the state expects you to spend on students' education. Outside, and the things that don't count into it are bonding, capital, pupil transportation. Those are outside of net school spending items. So everything else goes into that. This is the minimum. So when you divide it out, it comes to $17,632, which is in the box below it, per pupil. That number's, I like to explain that because that drives everything else. The next slide is a synopsis of our Chapter 70 summary. So you can see this year, we're getting $15,425,797 in Chapter 78. Moving down, I just showed you how that foundation budget was calculated on the previous slide. Number 3, required district contribution. You've heard my presentation before. This is the please do not shoot the messenger, AKA me. This is established by the state, not Tammy Crockett or Sheila Harity or Barbara Reynolds. This is a state calculation. Department of Revenue determines every community individually ability to pay. And I have a slide in here for Lunenburg. That's based on the community's property valuations, income levels, and then the Department of Revenue gives you applies a municipal revenue growth factor to your numbers and says, this is what we feel you can pay towards your school districts. So in our case, all 18 towns put together is $9,946,149. So that leaves the difference of $15,656,117. That's how they come up with our Chapter 78 increase. So it's an increase of $230,320. If that number was nothing, zero, if we weren't entitled to a Chapter 70 increase, those are they're called hold harmless districts, if you hear that term. All we would be getting is what you see in number 6, which a lot of districts are only getting, and that's the additional $30 increase per pupil. We would have only gotten $43,560, but instead they said, nope, the Chapter 70 that you need is higher, so we're increasing your Chapter 70 by $230,320. Moving over to the right-hand column, it's just kind of packaged for you. You can see our foundation enrollment numbers dropped by 22. Foundation budget, you see, we just saw how that's calculated. That goes up by $572,009. The required district contribution, $9,946,149, goes up $341,689, and you can see the Chapter 78 increase. I want to point out that under the Student Opportunity Act, everything we all heard or we all felt was more money to the schools, more money to the towns, to the cities, bigger investments in education. Yes, if you're an urban district, you are seeing substantial. I looked up one urban district today, they're getting $30 million additional Chapter 70. Rural, smaller communities are not. They're not getting big. So if you look, our foundation, our net school spending number went up like 2.29%, and most of that funding is set to come from the towns, per state. So I just think that's an important thing, because we all felt like this funding was going to be great and it was going to be less of a burden to the communities. We're finding it wasn't. Going to the next sheet, this is the required minimum contributions per town that belongs to Monty Tech. To the left, you can see the foundation enrollment of each. So Lunenburg went from 74 to 81. So it's an increase of 7 students.
Could I ask you on that? Excuse me.
Yes.
Is our enrollment capped?
So you have a quota every year, which I believe is 20, I think this year it's 24 pupils. And so we would take up to your quota, and then we do that for all our communities through June 1st. And then if we have pupils who are still on the wait list who would like to attend to Monty Tech, if towns don't fill their quota, which last year Lunenburg, this year, October of 19, you were, I believe, just one shy of your quota. The previous year, you were shy of your quota too, even for sending students. So,
But we're not exceeding our quota.
you have not exceeded your quota in the past couple of years. A lot of this too, you have to think of as, this includes, and I checked today, 6 school choice students who are in Leominster and Neshoba. Those get attributed to just as if they lived in Lunenburg and went to Leominster High School. You would get credit, you would get the Chapter 70 money for those students from the state, and then Lunenburg High School would pay Leominster $5,000 per kid.
Okay, I understand that.
So that's how it works with us too.
But
So
that somehow
Monty
gets
Tech,
funneled through you?
if they go to a vocational school, so the students, the 6 school choice students, go to Neshoba Tech and Leominster CTE. So what happens is, Monty Tech gets the Chapter 70 funds, you pay your portion of the assessment, and then we pay Leominster $5,000 per kid. So it works exactly the same way as your comprehensive
Are
school
we
choice.
paying you more than that $5,000 for that kid?
Yes.
Okay.
Just as you are when you are school choicing a student from Lunenburg to Leominster, you might be getting $7,000 and
It's capped at $5,000.
you pay them $5,000. That's kind of a misnomer that it's capped. The cap is $5,000 is the base. If that student is special ed, you will pay whatever, there's an
No, I
incremental
understand
base to
that.
that.
I understand
So
that.
what happens is, if you have a student who lives in Lunenburg that goes to Leominster, Lunenburg will get that student counted on their foundation enrollment. They say, yep, they belong to Lunenburg, so we're going to give you whatever they're giving you per pupil for Chapter 70. Let's say it's $7 or $8 grand that you're getting for Chapter 70 per student. Then in turn, you will only pay $5,000 out. So you will still net $3,000 on that pupil.
Okay.
Hope that makes sense. You get the Chapter 70, you pay out the school choice. Same, it works exactly the same way.
I guess my concern is, it's substantially more expensive to send a kid to Monty Tech than it is to Lunenburg High School. And it generally costs us, if a kid's school choice is out of Lunenburg and goes to, say, Fitchburg High or Leominster, that cost to us is give or take $5,000 because it's a capped rate.
Correct.
If a student's school choices to Neshoba or Leominster,
Yes.
and that number is sitting outside of our planning number, which is our quota for Monty Tech, are we now paying that premium rate because it's basically skirting around the limitation of the quota
Because they're
number?
attending a vocational school.
But they're not counted in the Monty Tech quota.
They are not.
They're not.
Because we have no control over those pupils. You have no control over those pupils. It's school choice. Just like you can't tell a student who lives in Lunenburg, they cannot go to Leominster High School.
No, and I...
cannot tell a
but I-
pupil,
but I
nor
am-
can we.
But I am concerned about the reality of a student chooses one school over another, and
Right.
it obligates the town for substantially more money as a result of the nature of the school that he or she has chosen, when from a budgeting perspective, we've allocated and planned for a specific quota for Monty Tech. And I know this isn't your fault, I'm not shooting the messenger.
Yep.
But there are a number of issues associated with the Education Reform Act that, and I brought this up at our last meeting, I would love to see Senator Tran, I would love to see Representative Hay come and explain to us situations that you just described where it's actually having a reverse effect. It's an unfunded compliance mandate is essentially what it's turned into. But this is a loophole that until just now I was unaware of.
And it's, it goes back to the fact that, yes, it's this family's choice. That's their freedom. They can choose.
Within
They
the
can
within the
school
confines of
choice.
the law, which apparently the
Well,
law
within the
is.
confines, so they can
Right.
choose to attend, if they live in Lunenburg, they can go to Boston.
But I guess the
Latin
question,
if they
I think
want.
part of the question goes to, are those 6 choice out? Like, I have to look at the paperwork from last year to see how many choiced out.
Yeah. but
I don't know
off the top of
if
my
those
head.
6 are, like, how many of the 7 are in there? Because I thought, based on our numbers, that we wouldn't have seen as many new enrollments as we have this year, but a year ago was a long time ago. I'm trying to remember what it was that caused me to think that there was a limited number of students that you could accept from us in terms of enrollment at Monty Tech.
So we set a quota, the easiest way to explain it is we set a quota which is the floor, not the ceiling. So what we do for all of our communities and how that's established, how a quota is set is your town, your superintendent's office tells me how many school attending children you have in the district.
Right.
Which you'll see on a slide.
Yeah, I think
And then we
okay,
take
yeah.
that all into account and we say, okay, Lunenburg is, and I will give you, Lunenburg is 6.87% of our district school-attending children.
Right.
And so when the school committee sets a quota of 355 for freshman class, Lunenburg gets apportioned 6.87%, Fitchburg gets apportioned X percent, and it all totals up, and we round to the whole child.
Right.
And it all totals up to 355.
Okay,
Then
so
what
that's the number I'm
happens? Yep,
thinking of.
and
yep.
we will hold, if you are getting 24 kids, we are holding that spot for Lunenburg students till June 1st. And this is as in the, dictated in the,
Okay.
it's discussed in the regional agreement. So we will hold them for June 1st till June 1st for Fitchburg, Harvard, Holden, Lunenburg. Those are your seats. After June 1st, what happens is there is no more quota seats. There's just kids who want to come to Monty Tech, and about 120 of them. So after that, if we have not filled the 355 kids that we are capable of taking, we just start saying, down the list. None of them could come from Lunenburg. 10 of them could come from Lunenburg. It just depends where they are on the list. Just going straight down and after June 1st.
So let me just kind of get to brass tacks here and skip to the chase. Your required district contribution increase this year is $341,689.
Yes.
If I understand your numbers correctly.
Correct.
Which represent a 3.56 increase. Lunenburg's increase this year is $91,774,000 of that number. I know it's not really the same, but for sake of argument, it's a big chunk of that number.
Sure is.
Well over, nearly 30% of that number,
Yep.
over 25% of that number. The one demographic shift that I can see that could potentially drive that, in addition to just the general increase in expenses, is that we've got an increase of 7 students in enrollment from 74 to 81. So I have a couple of questions specific to this, but is that the primary driver of that increase?
It's primary but not total. If you go, and I think you'll be answered a little better if you go to the next 2 slides that represent Lunenburg. This is how the state set your required minimum. So it's not just 7, because if you go to the second page of this, I want to really point this out. The one that says apportionment of local contribution across school districts. Look at 20. You had 74 pupils at Monty Tech and 1,705 attributed to Lunenburg. Last year, Lunenburg's required contribution to Monty Tech was $712,494. And to Lunenburg, it was $10,176,765. Look at what the state says for this year. You have the same number of pupils in Lunenburg Public Schools this year as you did last year. That number didn't even change by 1. Yet the state is going to make you pay, or the town pay, Lunenburg Public Schools, $350,742 more to start with. That's where Monty Tech's come in. You can see the state says, now you got 81 kids, well, you're going to give Monty Tech $814,745, and automatically your required minimum is $102,251. Our total increased assessment to Lunenburg is approximately $111,240 in total. You can see $102,000 of it came from the state, and this is the portion of the presentation where I say, please don't shoot the messenger. I did nothing here. I did none of these calculations. This is the Department of Revenue's calculations. You might disagree that on line 14 on the previous page, that they're attributing a 4.16 municipal revenue growth factor. I know that the state, as part of the SOA Act, has put something out to the DOR to look at how this is calculated, because this has been happening since approximately 2003, this method. And they've said, take a look at it. Let's see if this is working, if this is what's right. So This, and again, I was telling you, they base it on, you can see your equalized valuation and your income for the community from those years that they've indicated. And they come up with, the state is even saying, if you look at number 10 on that first slide, they're saying we think Lunenburg can pay $11,825,175 towards their schools. Well, when they look at what you're paying this year on line 13, multiply out the municipal revenue growth factor, they're saying that you should really pay $11,342,252 this year. So when you look down, they're still attributing, even though your required minimum went up quite a bit between us and Lunenburg, they're still saying you have a shortfall of 482. So again, this is where, I really empathize. This is a big increase. Like, I did not expect, it's 103,000 that the state set of our total assessment increase.
Yeah, I mean, my read on this is that we're entered into a charter and that we have very little control of the formulas that drive our financial commitments to it. Some level of our control is through our state representation, who has been completely moot on this point. We were driven to support the SOA. Multiple boards in this town wrote letters of support to it. I frankly don't think having a full understanding of what the outcomes are, I've said it here many times, I think that morally it was the right thing to do. But I think that there are ramifications that we had absolutely no idea what the effects would be. And we're feeling that pinch now. And, I've said it here, this will be the third time. I really want to hear from Senator Tran in particular on this.
And I have to agree with your comment. Morally, it is the right thing to do, to try to get all students on an equal playing field. So I totally understand why the urban districts are seeing a lot of the increases because of where they are increasing the fundings. But I also hear your frustration.
And we're being hit, we're being hit doubly, triply, if you really think about it. Number one, we're all paying state income taxes, and because the incomes are generally higher in Lunenburg, as has been calculated in this sheet, we get to spend more of our tax dollar on urban school districts, which again, I think is fine to be doing that. But now we also get to spend more on our Monty Tech assessments because of our property values and incomes, in addition to our change in enrollment. And we really don't have control over our enrollment at Monty Tech either,
Can I just ask a question, just to come at it from a different direction? Does this mean that the Monty Tech actual operating budget has nothing to do with the assessment that we're getting?
It's not 100% accurate. Your minimum contribution that the state sets is somewhere, and I didn't do the math specifically for Lunenburg, but it normally, and you can very easily, it normally makes up about 85% of your total assessment. The other components that as Monty Tech has control over is what we spend above the required minimum net school spending. The other component of your assessment is pupil transportation, Lunenburg's apportionment of that. We really don't have, we have control, but we don't. We're contractually obligated to transport the students, and those are our contracts. So again, another component is the amount of capital that we're asking to put in for our capital plan, and then your proportionate share of that.
Are we going to get into that detail as well?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
All right.
So, yes, I hope you brought your PJ. I'm just kidding. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the budget summary. I think these next couple of slides will address your question. So again, in the budget summary, looking down the line of proposed FY21, you can see net school spending. I think we've talked that one to its end. Transportation, again, that's our contractual transportation costs to transport the pupils. This is where I talked about the above net school spending. We're proposing to be $680,619 above our required net school spending. That is 2.7% above. This current year, when I came to you last year, we were proposing being 1% above. After all the state changes, we're currently 0.5% above. And you need to be above the state. You either need to make your net school spending or be above it. You get penalized if you do not, if you go below. So if you go below it, in 1 year, the state adds that to your spending requirement in the next year. If you go up to 5% below it, the state requires you to spend it in the next year and makes you get it from the towns, not them or any other funding source. Now, you'll see more clear on another slide, the way I break it out. Our budget is only going up, if you look on the total budget, $54,000 this year in total, or 0.19%. Reason being are the bonds, when we did the renovation back in 2000, those bonds matured in 2020. So we no longer have those. That's a net savings of $240,000, because if you look in the 20 column, all the way down to the bonds, you can see we were paying 1188. We were getting the school building authority reimbursement, so the net assessment to the communities was $240. We're putting that back into our bond spending is outside of net school spending. We're putting that back into our net school spending category.
But at the same time, retiring the bonds is a one-time event. So that means that next year, say fiscal '21 going to '22, will be a higher year-to-year, will likely be a higher year-to-year change.
Well, or we might not be as far above on net school spending as we are, so it might still net out equally, because our spending requirement probably will go up, because the state is doing the SOA for 7 years, so they're phasing in increases to the Chapter 70. So I could presume, depending on enrollment, inflation factors, I could get into all that. I can presume, I didn't say assume because, no, presume that our spending could go up next year, our required spending. But then we'd have less, we would have less above net school spending, so the budget itself could stay very close, tight, similar. That would be the thought process on that. The next components, and I think it'll make sense too in other slides, the next components that we're looking for is capital, $345,000, and vehicles, $100,000. So the net, both of those are considered capital items. The net increase on that line of those two items would be $30,000.
Okay, and just because we're now getting into where we see that you're pulling from your excess and deficiency fund.
Yes.
Do you have, well, you wouldn't have any numbers from 2020, but do you have from 2019, whether you ended the year adding to or taking from?
I can tell you what the Department of Revenue certified our E&D at last week.
Perfect.
$1,177,004. So we are proposing to take $400,000 of that this coming year, which is an increase of $150,000.
Okay.
Yep, from what we took out last year. The next component, you could see Chapter 70. Then going down the revenue columns, our transportation aid currently is estimated at $1,511,290. We're also proposing to put in, we have a regional transportation reimbursement fund. It's a revolving fund. How that works is you can deposit your state aid transportation money into it, but it must be used in the following year to offset transportation costs. The state had a supplement, revenues unexpected that were above estimates. So they made a large deposit from FY19 funds into the state's rainy day fund. Along with that, they funded other line items in the budget. They gave them supplemental funding. One of those line items from FY19 was regional transportation. So this year, we are getting additional $50,000 in transportation reimbursement from FY19's budget. So we are proposing to put that right back in to offset our transportation costs next year, decrease community assessments. Sure. And again, the next component would be using E&D funds to offset that, and then capital, the 445, which is the two above, less 125,000 of E&D funds. So bringing total community assessments to 11,197,458, increase of 501,265. But if you look up on number one, a lot of that increase to our communities was set by the state under the required minimum contribution increase. The next slide, I think we've beaten around a lot too. It's just the foundation enrollments for each of our communities and the school attending children numbers that we receive from each community. The next slide gives you your percentages that I talked about. So the left hand is based on your foundation enrollment number. So Lunenburg is 5.58% of our operating costs and 6.87% of our capital costs. And that, again, as I explained earlier, is how your quota is arrived at, based on that percentage. So going down, the next page is the community assessments. And yes, Lunenburg had the largest increase, 111 to 11, driven by increase in students of 7 and driven by that $102,200 required minimum contribution increase. So you can see how other communities, I'll just point out, not that misery loves company, but like Sterling, they stayed the same numbers, 62. They went up 75,000, and that was driven by their required minimum contribution as well. They had a $70,000 increase in that alone with no student increase.
But in 18 communities, we're 20% of the total change from the 2 years. 111,000.
More than that.
Yeah, 22%.
It's a large.
Yeah, it's just striking.
The next slide too, I broke out your 2-year comparison so you can see exactly. So again, look from 20 to 21. The largest component of it is the required. And it calculates to be $10,971 per pupil that the community would pay out of your tax base per pupil. The additional, because we're required, as you recall, to spend $17,432. The difference is what we get in Chapter 70 on behalf of Lunenburg for those students. So hopefully this gives you a picture also.
Okay, so then basically if we had fewer, actually, let me go back. So that 10,971 per pupil is based on Monty Tech numbers? The 1706 is a Monty Tech number?
The 81 is the Monty Tech number, so it's literally your total assessment divided by the number of foundation enrolled pupils.
All right, so then basically then, if we had fewer students attending, we would have a higher assessment per pupil, and the state would be contributing less?
If you had fewer students attending,
Right.
it still could work out to be 10,971. It would just be multiplied by a different number. So your assessment would be smaller.
Okay, well, I guess I'm having trouble understanding where the 10,971 is coming from then.
Oh, okay. So as part of the requirement, if you start with the foundation, let's go on 2021, you start with the foundation budget, 1,428,226. That is literally 81 students attributed to Lunenburg times what the state said we must spend on them, 17,432, going back in mind. So that's the math. The next component is what we said the state has determined is Lunenburg's ability to pay towards that 1,428,000. The other pieces, so the transportation, capital, and bonds, are the transportation and operating is our above net school spending in our transportation, less the revenues we're applying. Transportation, revolving transportation, and E&D, and then it's taking that gross number and multiplying it by Lunenburg's percentage, which is 5.58%. So that's how it's coming up with the 51,000. The 21 is taking what we're proposing for capital, less the excess and deficiency we want to use, and then that's multiplied by the 6.87%, because that's Lunenburg's capital apportionment. And then, as I said, we don't have the bonds anymore, so that went away. So those are the components, the plus 23.7, the plus 18, and the minus 16 are really the Monty Tech controlled items.
Okay.
Semi-controlled, because again, we're not controlling the, you know what I mean, we're contractually obligated to that.
Sure.
So, and then literally, all I do is take the total of assessment divided by the foundation enrollment and say, this is what Lunenburg would pay per pupil out of their tax base in total for those pupils. Okay, getting to the preliminary budget on the next slide, I kind of broke it out a little differently. So it's just a different view, same numbers. You can see our revenues, where they increase and decrease to come to the total of our total budget increase of $54,663. Then the next set of numbers, net school spending. You saw the requirement went up, $572,009. The above net school spending increased, or we're proposing to increase, $533,962. For a total of net school spending items of $110,591. Then you can see below it, our transportation costs are increasing, capital increasing, decreasing bonds, for a minus effect on outside of net school spending items of minus 105,1309. So again, that's where we come back to a net total budget increase of 54,663. Now I have asterisks, the 110,591. On the next slide, I'm showing you what is going into that number, that increase. Health insurance increase, $237.25. That's a projection of 7% increase from December 1st, when our plans renewed, to June. This year we did a 5% increase, and the consultants were telling us to do a 12, but we thought we could maybe work more conservatively. So that's where the 7 is. State retirement assessment, the $232,000 is an increase. It's not the total. The total of this line is $430,000. And what the state retirement assessment is, we were fortunate, us and about 13 other vocational schools, were not being billed by the Commonwealth of Mass for 40 years. And they caught up with us about 5 years ago. And what this assessment is everybody who retires from Monty Tech in the state retirement system, not even just from Monty Tech, from any school in the Commonwealth that worked at Monty Tech for one point in time and contributed to the state retirement system, we have to pay our portion of their retirement check.
Right.
So we get assessed every year. Well, fortunately, for 40 years, we weren't assessed, and we didn't know any better. But now we've started. So when I first started budgeting for this, our first bill was $240,000. Last year, they caught up with everybody and retroed it, and it was $440,000, this year's bill.
So it is, you're retroactively expected to pay the, for the period of time you did incur?
We don't have to go back 40 years. It was just in the first year of our billing. They didn't have all the active retirees on it. So
So you're not expecting another 50% increase in that number?
not after this year. I hope not. One thing there are, and I'm sorry, I don't mean.
No, I was just going to ask you what the rate is at this point that you're charged per active employee.
It's different. It's based on their retirement.
Okay, so,
And then our percentage of what they worked at Monty Tech for.
okay, so, well, I'm just going from, like, right now, if you had been paying it all along, so they haven't gotten to the point of setting a rate for you, so we have to pay 7.2% for
See,
every
that's what
employer.
we're hoping
employee.
for.
Right, right, right.
There's actually legislation throughout the superintendents
Sure.
of our districts to say, please, just give us a rate, a 4%, a 5%, so we can budget appropriately.
Sure.
Because right now, no, things like,
Yeah, they didn't miss
this
us for
happened.
40 years, so.
I
they
know,
don't even-
unfortunately,
yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were fortunate that they did not, they said it was our mistake, we're not going back 40 years. So they just started from that year on.
Okay. I'm sorry, Peter, did you have another question? No, okay.
Okay, so that's what that is. We are in contract negotiations right now, so I don't know the COLA for next year. But I do know, even without a COLA, what we're obligated for step and column movements. That's $144,363.
That's just if you projected your current,
That's a 0% COLA. Yep, just people moving up on the salary schedule, up steps, or over based on education.
your contract ends when?
August 31st,
And you haven't budgeted some increase beyond that for next year?
There's some room,
Okay.
some room.
Do you have a reserve account that you can pull from, or no?
No, we do not have the reserve for unanticipated expenditures, not in that case. But, great question. Also, begin funding compensated absence fund. This is a recommendation based on our auditors. The compensated absence is separation pay or sick leave buyback that is still in the contracts for support staff. We got rid of that aspect out of the teaching contract, but in turn, they have an enhanced longevity that they can get for 3 years. So after working there for 15 years, they can get an enhanced longevity payment, which is $15,000, and it's paid over 3 years. And then, of course, as other support staff retire, they can sell a certain amount of their sick time back at a small percentage. Well, as of June 30th, 2019, our liability for this is $445,000. That would be if everybody took advantage of it right now. But because it's such a sizable liability, the auditors want us to recognize it and recognize that that liability is out there. So the school committee voted to establish this fund and just put the small piece of it in to show we recognize it, but we do fund it as we go.
Is that a one-time gesture of good faith, or is it the first of 11 payments until you
I think that the
pay the 400, or fill up the 440?
Yeah, I think the school committee will probably vote to put smaller pieces in after this, but yet pieces, like 5 or 10,000 to make a small investment into the fund.
And all this puts a higher floor on your year-to-year annual increase of education.
Yeah. Yeah, correct. Yep. The next component, which I'm sure you're all familiar with this one, OPEB liability. We do not currently have one. The school committee voted to establish a fund, and again, on one of the slides, you'll see that our OPEB liability is $39 million. We're not proposing to fund that. This is a small token so that for bond rating and borrowing. I'm sure, I haven't looked at Lunenburg's books, but I'm sure you have one. We're one of the last to kind of get on this, I think. It's just a small token again. Technology increase is, we used to make big investments in technology and buy everything at the end of a year, every couple years when we had the funds. Because all these skills capital grants and all of our shops with so much high tech in it, it's becoming obsolete so quick that we were not getting the value out of what we were buying. It was losing its value so quickly. So we're moving more towards a steady lease of all the equipment so that it can be fixed and we can trade it in every 3 years without ebbs and flows and spikes in our technology budget. So we're just about getting there. I think this is a very small increase comparatively to last year. You probably heard me when I told you we had a $250,000 technology increase. This is lowering as we flatten out. I told you about the staffing for the ESL, adding a 0.5. That's part of our SOA planning. And again, other considerations, you know, that are in here are COLA percentage increases in trying to sustain budgets for instructional equipment and supplies. They are decreasing a bit in this year, just to fund other items. We have to find some place to make the decrease. So if you go to but we want to keep them as close because it's very important to the pupils' education to have what they need. So if we go to the following slide, you'll see the summary by function code, so that you can see over the past couple of years our spending and where some of the increases are. So again, largest increase in the teaching line. That's, of course, with possible COLAs and the step and column movements. And then, as I just spoke of, a decrease in the textbooks and instructional materials lines, kind of to compensate for some of these increases. Student transportation, another large increase, again, contractual. Cutting back a little bit in our maintenance, operations and maintenance, and then again, in the fixed charges, as I talked about earlier, health insurance and state retirement assessment, those are the large pieces in that. And then you can see the breakout of the transfer to compensated absence fund, OPEB, and transfer to stabilization fund, which makes up the total budget increase. The next slide just discusses compensated absences and OPEB. You all are familiar with that, and I think we got there with the last conversation. Moving along, capital and vehicle replacement. So as Dr. Harity mentioned earlier, strategically, we're trying to be cautious about what capital things we fix or do, but yet addressing priorities. The culinary entrance glass enclosure, we were supposed to do this past year, but it turned out to be such a large endeavor that we needed to wait. And that's if you've ever been to our restaurant, when you come in, there's a glassed-in solarium. It's leaking, and it's a liability. We cannot have the public being in there with that. So that's a priority. Our main generator is failing. It's original to the building, so it put in there in 1970, so it's had a pretty good life, but we need to replace that. Engineering and graphics. Engineering, air conditioning, graphics, also dehumidified and tempered air. When we did the rooftop replacement about 6-7 years ago, the $10 million project, the shops, the rooftops that had AC, got AC again, the ones that didn't. Not anticipating for the fact that engineering has so much technology in it that the room is getting so hot that it's damaging the technology that's in that room. We can't have that. There's hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment. So to add air conditioning to that rooftop unit, as well as graphics, the paper is folding. The paper is curling. It's not conducive to their shop atmosphere, so they need it. Classroom upgrades. That comes along with some of the skills capital grants that we got. Automotive, you saw, got a whole new revamp. Well, they need some revamp to put in their new equipment. They need a new tool crib, different things. So these are going towards upgrading the facilities to where we got this grant funding to put in great new equipment. Also, the transfer to stabilization fund, $45,000. Currently in that fund, we have $225,844. Again, because we want to be able to offset some of our own capital expenses for our communities, but building it up very slowly. Vehicle replacement, 71-passenger bus, so we provide after-school busing to students. And this bus, or we have several buses that are 10 years plus old, so we plan to trade one in, get a new one. And one of our maintenance vehicles needs replacing, and again, that would have a trade-in to offset that. My last two slides are more statistical. The first one is communities in our district and vocational schools. It's just to give you an idea of how Monty Tech is doing or where we stand. This is data as of June 2019. It's the most up-to-date data on the DESE website. This is our net school spending compared to our requirement. So I've highlighted us. I've done it from top. So over in the FY19, budgeted net school spending as percent of foundation. So in FY19, we were at the 100.8. Again, we're proposing in FY21 to be at 102.7. So that's in FY21. So you can see even, where people are in FY19, we still fall well below other districts in our communities and other vocational schools. And the last slide was updated by DESE in November, this past November. It's FY18 per pupil expenditures, and it's based on all funds that you have. I compare us to vocational schools here because that is the apples to apples comparison for this type of data. And again, I did it from most spending per pupil to least. And you can see we fall third from the bottom in that. Not that we're third from the bottom in greatness, just in spending. And that is it.
Questions?
No. Thank you very much for all the
You're
information.
welcome.
Comprehensive.
Appreciate you listening to all of this.
I do have some questions.
Yes.
First of all, thank you for the comprehensive presentation. I don't know how people like you and Karen and our other budget people do what they do. There's too much stuff to keep track of. It boggles my mind, so well done.
Thank you.
Not alone.
My question is about the process that you engage in with the local communities around the budgeting process. So, for example, these are discussions that start in Lunenburg informally in August, September, October. We get a target/proposed budget December, January, and then we get closer and closer to the real thing.
Sure.
Come our town meeting in May. We learned today, as members of this committee, of a substantial increase in our assessment from Monty Tech. And, it's something that we may or may not be able to absorb. I gather from, at least my interpretation from what you've described, we really don't have a whole lot of recourse in the grand scheme of things. Even if you did not fund 2x% above foundation funding, it would not have a substantial savings to Lunenburg because of the drivers that you described. That being said, it's a substantial amount of money and a surprise. Is there any way that we could have been apprised of this sooner? And should we have been, and have there been communications that would have brought this to our attention sooner?
So, the school committee voted on it last night. One thing, but yes, to your point, yes, it could be sooner. We did send a copy of the budget to the town clerk, Dr. Harry's administrative assistant, but again, it was only last week, ahead of the public hearing on the budget, and it was posted on our website last week. That being said, we can determine a budget within reason, December, January. I could not begin to tell you with 18 communities how it would affect Lunenburg because of the state, because when Lunenburg calculates it for Lunenburg, it's one community. I have to almost wait till the state tells me. I didn't see a $103,000 increase coming to Lunenburg.
So when did you see that? When, I mean, obviously, the
When the
formulas
governor's-
were,
yep.
I know the formulas came out relatively late because of the
Well,
changes in
when the governor's budget came out, third week of January.
Okay.
Yep, that's when I see it. That's when I start to see. Yep.
So we could have
could
done an
you
estimate
know-
based off the foundation. We could have said, based on foundation, it would be at least this much.
This is coming.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I've duly noted that from hearing this and working with Heather today and answering some of her questions. We should, at the very least, this is a good year because we have the same governor. When it's a new governor, they have a couple weeks longer. They have it into February. So again, yes, I would love to give you, because I understand what you're going through, and I hate doing this, like giving you a number that they just voted on yesterday.
Yeah, but
I
I
don't
mean,
want to give you
our school
something.
committee is not going to vote on their budget for another month. But we've got a pretty good idea what it's going to be because
Exactly.
of regular
It's
communication with
one,
our
well, and it's one
superintendent.
community, it's easy to calculate, it's easy to say, we expect, we're gonna be this, we'll give ourselves an estimate, you're right. So, absolutely, at the very least, in the beginning of February,
Okay.
we should be able to at least give you some
The heads up,
preliminaries.
yeah, some
Yep.
kind of a heads up,
And I do
sure.
have town managers, so again, Heather asked if we could work together much earlier. I said, absolutely, because I do have several town managers that reach out to me and say, just whisper a number to me, give me something. So, yep, we said we're gonna do the same thing, because I do not want this. Nobody wants this. The school committee does not want this. I do not want this.
My sense is that the formula that actually drives the allocation of your expenditures amongst the 18 communities is fairly consistent year to year. The actual numbers that go into that formula are a little bit different, but some of the drivers are probably fairly stable relative to other communities. So could you just at least give us, one approach would be to give us a sort of a range?
Yes.
Something that, a dollar per student,
Yep.
unlikely to be under this, unlikely to be over this. So at least we know
Yep.
something to
Yes.
to expect.
And
Absolutely.
then the student enrollment of 81 is based on October 1 enrollments?
I don't know on October 1 your enrollment because it factors in school choice students, and we do not get those numbers till the end of December.
Okay.
Yep.
Of that 81, I'm sorry, how many school choice?
6.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, because I was also just thinking that given the estimate, given how close the per pupil expenditure seems to be year to year, just even having that number would give us some sense of what we
Some
might be
sense.
looking at. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Some context.
And maybe we can get a sense from the school department, how many people are leaning toward toward Monty Tech.
I don't know that that would necessarily be true, because you don't have to go to the superintendent's office in Lunenburg to say, I'm interested in applying to Monty Tech.
Okay.
So they might not have that information, so,
Right.
and they certainly wouldn't know if they're opting to go to Leominster CTE, or maybe they were at Leominster CTE and then they moved into Lunenburg. I mean, it's hard to say how
It's a
that
slippery
works.
number, again, it's not as easy as.
But at least having the enrollment number in December, and then some more of the, like other information, that would be
We do provide
awesome.
letters to the superintendent, but it's shortly thereafter, the October 1, just to say, these are your pupils that are enrolled.
Yep,
But it wouldn't, that's, to your point, the school choice. probably
right, that's the number that's, I mean, because that was basically if it's 6 of them are out of district, then I wouldn't have picked up that we were going to have a big increase, because it would have looked very much like last year's numbers.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions for Tammy while she's here? Obviously, we have to chew on I'm sorry, Dave, go ahead.
Just a quick comment. I just wanted to say that, again, if my calculator worked right, the overall budget increase for the school district, for Monty Tech itself, comes out to 1.9%. So, as we've been talking about this evening, the foundation formula is what really shot us in the foot.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, and it always does,
Just-
yeah.
Just want to be
Yeah, but
clear
particularly this year.
to everybody
Yeah.
that, Monty Tech has done a great job in controlling their overall budgetary increase, but the way it was calculated for the assessments to the individual towns, we
Yeah.
really got hit hard.
I agree.
Right.
I agree.
Right.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much
Thank you.
again for your
Thanks for
time and
coming.
consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you for hanging with us. All right. Actually, I think what we might request is, I know that I've tried in the past, it's not for you guys, so you don't have to hang. No, we're not going to make you wait. The issue of bringing Kevin Tran forward, I guess what I'd like to
Dean.
maybe request,
Dean
I'm sorry?
Tran,
Dean Tran, what did I say?
Kevin.
I'm sorry.
Representative Chan.
No, he's the senator.
Oh, he's the senator.
He's the senator. Is it possible to try to set something up through the Board of Selectmen, because I was unsuccessful as the Finance Committee? And then because even if they presented there, Representative Hay and Senator Tran, if they presented there, then we could join that. I'm sorry? To the Board of Selectmen. Yeah, I think basically I could have got an aide, but I couldn't get the senator, but I'm thinking the Board of Selectmen, like if there's more people involved in it, in raising the questions that we might have, especially around some of the funding priorities coming up and how, I'm assuming that part of the question is around the school funding that you wanted to go.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's really my only concern.
So basically, then it may also be in potentially inviting the school committee as well, to just a discussion on school funding through the state reps' perspective. And I think it's one of the tough things is Fitchburg probably did very well. And Lunenburg just didn't. No. Do we anticipate we'll do better next year? All right, so we have someone from the assessor's office who is going to talk to us about new growth and why we should be depressed about our changes this year.
Hopefully not depressed.
I don't know. How are you doing?
Fine. Harold Scheid, for those of you who haven't met me, been your assessor here for 27 years, I think. I might have a new growth document that I prepared.
There you go. It looks like I have someone's.
Thank you.
No, I don't think I do,
New
for some
paper.
reason. I thought I saw one, and now I don't. Okay. Here, I'll give him back his extra copy. Great.
Yep, we're good. Okay,
Great. So I come at your invitation to talk a little bit about new growth, the projected number, obviously very early in the assessment year, is a bit less than what we've seen over the last few years. First, by way of definition, new growth revenue is associated with any new properties that are constructed over a 12-month period here in Lunenburg. That would include any new homes, any new businesses, might also include new personal property assets. Some of the solar developments that have gone in translate into new taxable properties. Lunenburg has benefited over the last 10 years by some very strong growth, much of that coming from the Emerald Place development on Electric Ave. That was a real engine for a number of years of some very strong new growth revenue. When that started falling off, we saw last year the Lunenburg Luxury Apartments off of Whalum, a rather large development that fed that continued new growth trajectory. We also saw a large addition off of Pioneer Drive, Ecofibers, and then some of the solar developments. Unfortunately, that development has now fallen off. We have nothing in the pipeline to replace those projects. In undertaking our new growth revenue projections this year, as part of that process, we always talk to the building inspector and sat with Casey a couple of months ago now to see if there was anything new on his desk that we could point to that would help buffet our projections. And of course, the outcome of that discussion led us to believe that there really isn't anything of any note that we can point to that would allow us to project a more aggressive number than we have. So that is the brief explanation of why the new growth number is trending downwards. Let me say at this juncture that, of course, it's early in the year. The construction that we anticipate in the coming months might surprise us with a project that we hadn't anticipated. So usually we have a fairly good handle on the actual new growth number towards the end of the summer. We conclude all of our inspections towards the end of June, completing that work in July and August, and then we develop our new growth report for the Department of Revenue along about September. I know in the past we've been asked for updated new growth numbers leading up to a fall town meeting, and in some years we've been able to up the number, but a bit early in the process. It's our council, as it has been in the past, to build a budget around conservative numbers, and then if we are pleasantly surprised later in the year, then that's all to the better.
Okay. John?
The anticipated new commercial and industrial development, the convenience store on Electric Avenue,
Yes.
yielding $1 million in net new growth revenue. What time is that? Any timing on that?
So that project is largely completed now, and understand that we're talking net additional value. There's some underlying value there of the existing facility. These sorts of properties tend to carry a value of around 1.6 to 1.8 million, but you have to back off the current valuation of the property. So $1 million would be the estimated net.
Incremental.
Right.
net. Okay, thanks.
Is it possible to do forecasting with assessments? I imagine that at one point in time, it was probably a strong bet that we were going to have this fall off because the building just wasn't there. So I am surprised that this is a surprise, that we didn't have some type of hint of this before now. And I don't know if perhaps it should be thought to do forecasting because of what has happened with this. Is that possible?
Not really.
Yeah?
Projects come to the planning board usually as the first sign that a new development is coming.
Yeah.
for every project that moves forward with an actual construction, there are probably any number of other projects that are proposed that never end up gaining traction and get built out, so.
So help me understand, if someone comes in and gets approved to do a project and they start building on May 1st, at what point in time does that get assessed a value?
We look at the status of construction on June 30th of each year. June 30th is the day before the new fiscal year begins, and by statute, whatever is in the ground on June 30th is what we can tax in the following fiscal year. So, with hundreds of building permits, we obviously can't inspect all of them on June 30th, but we do, at least on the major projects, attempt close to June 30th to try to capture a picture of what was constructed, translating that into value then.
Okay, because it would seem to me that a major project doesn't happen overnight. So it could, I think that doing forecasting does have some benefit. It's not necessarily going to be 100%, but I think there's some benefit to it, to be able to say, we don't have anything on the horizon, or this is what I see on the horizon now, to have that as a baseline, and then as projects come up, I mean, it can be part of the dialogue. But I'm trying to figure out how we can, stay ahead of these assessments, because it's great when it goes up, but clearly it's very problematic when it goes down.
So let me point to an example. There's a proposed large development off of Howard Street.
Yep.
When that was first proposed, we had no clue. Was that going to be under construction this year, next year, potentially 3-4 years down the road? Really don't know. A lot of that knowledge, if you will, is really in the hands of the investor and developer. There are all sorts of issues that can confound a project, not the least of which is the regulatory process, getting through all of your approvals at the town level. So we are looking ahead already at that project as perhaps the next project in the pipeline that will yield some additional growth. But what is their timeline for building that out? We don't really know. They could tell us we'll build a couple of hundred new homes in a year's time or 5 years' time.
Your, in the example that you gave in that project, though, for example, I believe you've allocated $360,000 in growth value to the sublet, to the basically dividing the properties, right? Is that what's happening there?
Right. There's some value in getting
Creating a lot.
plan drawn up and recorded.
Okay.
And, but that's before any infrastructure has been built out. It's simply,
So does that mean a property could have additional value added to it? So in this year, the plot has this new growth value, but in the next year, because the plot transformed from this to this, I'm now going to add more to the new growth for that
Yes.
transformation? Okay.
yes.
So
Happens on the land level as well as, of course, any new homes that are constructed.
do you, based on what you know, and you may not, the Howard Street project, looking at, I think we've been told, I think up to 20 units per year is kind of their plan over a 4 or 5 year period, once they get going on that. Do you have any idea what the valuation of that will be?
Depends on what segment of the market they're looking to build for. My sense is that builders are shying away from the luxury market. That high-end home is no longer a product that
They're
people
not
want to buy.
obligated to build the 4-bedroom houses that they've planned for.
Right, and the economic scene can change radically even over a 6-month period. As a developer, you might envision building $800,000 homes and realize that the market will only support a $500,000 home. Those sorts of decisions are some of the variables that we play with in trying to figure out what kind of revenues we can anticipate and when.
I mean, this strikes me as a mixed blessing, right? I mean, for years and years and years, all we heard was growth is bad, growth is bad, growth is bad. Now we look at this from a next year budgeting perspective and we say, oh, well, we need new growth. Well, we're also paying for, we're having to expand our police department and our fire department and our school department to account for the services needed to be rendered for the new growth that we've benefited from over the course of the last several years.
Exactly.
So there's a trailing effect that
Comes with an overhead.
comes with.
Yeah, fair enough.
Hollis Hills did not show up at all here on your sheet that I could see. As I understand, there are two separate projects there. One is 2 or 3 structures near Lake Whalum, and the other is some 30 acres or so that hasn't yet been developed.
So it would probably, I would say, would be baked into the residential number that you see here. We have a certain amount of residential growth that we see from year to year.
Yeah.
And that would be baked into probably the single-family growth number that we're.
Sure, glad to bring that up, because that was my second question, is there a baseline? To preface that, the years I've been on the FinCom, there's always been a new growth component that's, between 0.5% and 1% added on to the 2.5% that's by statute. We can increase. Over time, Mr. Scheid, have you noticed that there's a baseline that we can just expect that it will be at least 2.5% plus 1.5% new growth, or plus 1% new growth?
I haven't translated that into a percentage, but in a dollars and cents way, I would say that floor growth is really much of what we're seeing in the $216,000 number that's being presented to you. I see a figure of around $200,000 in new growth revenue is really that floor of new growth that we should be able to comfortably anticipate from year to year.
So we can pretty much count on that as a baseline. So when we're actually looking at the viability of spending money, we can be fairly comfortable in anticipating that over time, there'd be an additional $200,000 a year in revenue from new growth.
If we look at the last 10, 15 years, I think you'd see that $200,000 figure would be a predictable number that you could bank on.
Of course, to Peter's observation, of course, that $200,000 comes with anticipated, with increased need for basic government services. So that would translate into, things other than adding things.
Over time, but my sense is that you have a certain amount of margin in the departments that 10 new homes wouldn't translate into an FTE equivalent, for example.
Yeah, gotcha.
Except maybe in the schools.
Yeah, the schools.
Those 4-bedroom homes that yeah.
Well, interestingly, just an anecdote, we find that there's an inverse relationship between the size of the home as measured by bedrooms and the number of people that occupy the home.
Well, that's true. By the time you can afford it, probably your kids have moved out.
Well, that actually is a topic that I asked of the land use director when we had our symposium meeting back in October. And it was kind of along those lines, and I recalled from my days on the Zoning Board of Appeals many years ago, when we were looking at a 40B project, the consultant telling us, just because you're building 2-bedroom condos doesn't mean that there's going to be a kid in every single one of those condos. There's an accepted sort of formula that we can expect to come out of that. And I didn't get an answer from the land use director that was sufficient to what I was looking for. But I think that your help in the future, as we're looking at, for example, the Howard Street development or potential other developments, you know, in beginning to forecast that and help the superintendent and the town manager figure that out, you know, if that's part of your purview, I think would be very helpful for us from a planning perspective.
Unfortunately, so much of what we do in this exercise centers around
I know your job is
crystal
dollars and
ball
cents,
and
not
the,
people's, but
yeah, sometimes that crystal ball is clear and sometimes it's very murky, and
But let me just ask you a for instance question. You know that there's a development going in with 40 or 50 units that are projected to be 3 and 4 bedroom houses. And you're in central Massachusetts. We're in central, you know, is there a accepted formula within your practice and expertise that says of those developments in the last 10 years in central Massachusetts, here's the average in terms of what's been required for additional services for that type of development?
honestly, I haven't measured the increase in services that, as it relates to new construction, residential new construction.
Okay. I'm just asking because I didn't get an answer the last time I asked, so I'll just keep asking until I get somebody to answer.
I can give you an answer,
Make
it's
one up.
probably...
That'd be perfectly fine. Thank you.
But to follow up, you do have a history of what new growth was put in place, was installed by year for the last, say, dozen years, right?
Well, I can go back 27 years, not
Okay.
tonight, obviously, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but
The history exists, so we could, like, we might be able to learn by looking in the rearview mirror by what the effect of, what the effect, follow-on effect was to, say, police services.
Yeah, I mean, we got the reports
Fire.
last
Yeah.
week from police and fire that
Exactly.
specifically called out calls to the new
Sure,
developments that
yeah,
we've seen in the
yeah.
last 10 years. I mean, it's
So we
not
can do that if we
rockets,
can-
yeah. But those are, the difference is that over the last 10 years, we've experienced most of our growth in multi-tenant units.
Yeah.
Versus,
Which is different.
we don't have that specifically on the docket right now. We're not looking down the
Right.
barrel of a substantial multi-tenant unit development in the next 3 or 4 years. So,
But to use that example, it may not be anything that we're looking down the barrel at, but using that as an example, if we were, it could give us a guide of
right.
what to expect. And there may be some use in, say, the Butterfly Lanes or the Flat Hill, the Village in Flat Hill, to just get a sense for what that kind of development means to police calls or fire or library or schools.
I can tell you that there are some market dynamics that are interesting to note that we actually do take measurements of. For example, the high-end market has stalled. In fact, we're seeing a decline in the value of high-end properties. Why is that? I think you could speculate about a number of factors, but I think the aging of the population, people like myself that are entering retirement one of these days, hopefully, and are looking to downsize. We don't want the big house, we don't want the big tax bill, we don't want a high utility bill. So actually the smaller homes are where we're seeing most of our demand, and with that demand, value.
Right, yeah, and the
Are you
developers.
saying that on a regional basis, though? Because I've
Yes.
talked to developers in town, and they're selling single-family homes for $750,000 with no problem whatsoever.
Where is that threshold? Is it $700,000, $800,000? I'm not prepared to say, but I do know that in some of the communities further east that I work in, if you're, well, I'll take Town of Lincoln, for example, homes that we're selling for over $3 million are languishing 3, 4, 5 years, and when they selling for under $2 million. Sudbury, another community I work in, I won't name the street, but there are 4 side-by-side homes that once sold in the $2 to $3 million range that they're not selling.
And I think with the new developments, you're looking at, whatever the market will bear. So, yes, so for now, the developers are having an easy time selling those homes, but you also have situations where it pops up that if they don't have the profit margin, they're going to downsize their spending, and that's going to downsize the building. And I also would point out that the Saliba brothers had plans that were approved for development that never happened over 20 years, and that's why the town bought vacant land. I mean, so it's, in terms of trying to predict it, it's hard, but I think going back and looking at the effect of growth on town service costs, I think it would be a good exercise.
Can I just ask too, can you describe how our land values are increasing in Lunenburg? What factors are there? Are the land values increasing?
Very modestly.
Percentage, roughly?
Well, we saw value increases overall in the residential class in the 6 to 9% range this past year. And understand that assessed value isn't current value. It's as much as 2 years out of sync with the current value. Haven't taken measurements yet to see where values are tracking for the upcoming fiscal year. I do know in communities east of us that the market has stalled. And we have a swath of towns, including Town of Harvard, Bolton, and Points East, where we're measuring no gain in market value.
What types of things does Lunenburg have in our favor right, because there's a point where you have to keep value up so you can get the tax.
Relatively affordable homes compared to homes further east.
I can't afford Harvard anymore, I'm moving west.
Yeah, which is fine, I mean, that's great, that works.
So it's still,
Yes.
and the homes are still less,
And-
so that's,
and Lunenburg is, I think, as we probably all agree, one of the more desirable communities in this immediate region. It's always going to be an attractive community to look
Who
at.
sets the EQV?
That's calculated by the state. We furnish the numbers.
What is the
Okay.
EQV, please?
Equalized valuation for school funding purposes, other purposes, because they want to bring all communities on the same playing field. They look at your median assessment level. Are you assessing right at 100% or at 98% or 90%? They want to take your assessment level and bring you up to the 100% level for comparison purposes.
Okay, because so the EQV doesn't have any effect at all on
Your tax bill.
our tax bill? Okay, all right. Any other questions?
Yeah, recently out on the street, again, I hear a lot out on the street.
Stay off the street.
I love street talk.
You know, unfortunately, everybody knows me, my face. The question has come up a couple of times as to why the assessed values of properties in town were increased by 6%, both on the land side and the building side. There's some people now, first of all, is that correct? Second of all, some people feel that there's an inequity between the growth in land value versus property value, or buildings, personal property.
Well, without bringing out the Course 101 in mass property appraisal, I'll try to give you the quick and dirty explanation.
That's fine.
When we undertake our annual valuation work, we start by collecting a year's worth of sales. For the current assessments, the benchmark sales were derived from 2018. We compare the assessed value to the sale price, those properties, to calculate an assessment to sale ratio. You array those from low ratio to high ratio, that midpoint, that median level of value tells you what your assessment level is at. And so if you're, and I'm sorry, I'm operating from a little bit from recollection, a year out now, but our assessment level had dropped below 90%. Here in Lunenburg, we have to, we're compelled as assessors to raise our values to get them closer to that 100% level. Now, we don't go right to 100%, and why don't we? Because as we measure that assessment level, that would imply that half your properties have assessments that are over sale price and half have assessments below sale price. There's never a way that you can get all of your assessments to exactly mirror sale price. There's too much variability in the market to do that. So we have historically tried to maintain our assessment level at somewhere around 95% maybe. In a surging market, try to shoot for 97%. So if you fall below 90%, as we did, and you want to restore values up around 95%, say you're at 89%, that implies a 6% push in values. You then have to make a decision. Do I, as a mass appraiser, lift my land and building tables by 6%? Or do I weight buildings more greatly, raise the building values, say 7 or 8%, and land, say 4%? We go to land sales, what few land sales we have, to maybe give us some guidance on that decision. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of land sales to say with any confidence that land is appreciating more or less than building values. So a decision would often be made to equally impact both land and building. Those are the sorts of decisions that I, as a mass appraiser, have to make and defend when people question us.
And the person questioning will have a lot of, in most cases, a lot of acreage of land without buildings on it. And they're asking why are they going up the same percentage as properties with buildings on it?
Well, from a theoretical argument, land, why wouldn't land drive value as much as a building? Land is a scarcer commodity than buildings, and often are the driver of markets. So,
I guess their feeling is that an unimproved 25 acres of land doesn't appreciate as much, and we talked about this earlier, as a 25-acre plot of land that's now approved for subdivision.
true, but that's comparing apples and oranges. With the approvals in place, now you have a property of substantially greater value than just an unproven.
And now that I said that, that would actually be captured in another way from what we were talking before anyway, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Other questions?
Have we met our, is it the 10% quota for 40Bs?
I have no idea if we've met the 10% quota for 40Bs.
I think we're not far off, last I knew, but back in the Marion Benson days, I think we're, with Tri-Town, I think we were right to at or near 10%. That may have now slipped a bit, I don't know. Somebody else might have a better idea.
I missed that
Good to
altogether.
know.
Okay.
That would be good to know where we're at.
I'm sure they'll know in the planning office, so we can, so if you get a chance to reach out to, probably the planning director, and if you want to just come back with that, that would be awesome. Anything else, Mr. Scheid?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate your,
My pleasure.
your willingness to
Stick it out.
explain it
Well,
all to
you,
us.
you have to do the hard work. I don't envy you. But
Thank you very much, though.
we always get through the process, don't we?
We do indeed. It's not fatal.
Um,
Take care.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet.
Right, the next agenda item was to discuss the debt project setup. I don't know if we want to get into
I
that
would
this evening.
propose that, given the late hour,
We'll
we
put
punt
that
on
off.
this.
All right, we'll punt it beyond next week because, well,
Yeah,
no, okay.
It's not urgent.
Okay, then we'll punt on that. We have minutes.
Yes.
Yes.
We have minutes from, we've got our piles mixed up here. Okay, so
So
December 19th.
there are minutes from December 19th and January 9th,
Right.
which I hope you have both of them. I have doubled up on my piles.
Yeah, I do.
Okay. So these minutes, obviously I'm behind on minutes, trying to catch up. I've canceled my travel for next week, so hopefully I'll have some time to get more current. One question that I had on the January 19th, I distinctly remember Jay being here for that discussion, but you never came up on the tape, Jay. I don't think you, were you at that meeting?
Are you talking about December
January
19th or
9th?
January?
I'm sorry, the December 19th meeting, the one with the fire chief. I recall you being there.
Yeah, that one.
But as I was listening to the tape, I couldn't hear your voice.
Yeah, because I didn't, well, you have.
Video would have-
There was no video.
No video.
No, I had that, I had an audio
Oh,
recording.
okay, okay.
That's right, you did second the adjournment.
You were there.
Yeah, well, he seconded the
Oh, I
adjournment.
had him as a second unit German. Okay, all right. Must have been there.
Okay.
Unless it was snowing.
Case cracked.
I remember you asking that, but it just didn't come out on the tape, so.
Was it
anyway.
snowing on the 19th of December?
No,
No, the 9th, December
The
19th,
9th.
no, I was not here.
you were
It was
not.
I
snowing.
thought that was a meeting you
Okay.
No, that was like.
All right,
Oh,
so
you
I
had
was
a
in-
wake?
Pops.
Boston Pops.
All right, so I
Christmas
will
is- okay.
amend that accordingly.
Okay, so we don't know who seconded that.
We don't.
Okay.
It's hard with the audio tape to, sometimes you, all right, I will amend that
Well,
accordingly.
if Dave motioned it and Jay was not here and you thought it was Jay, it's probably John
Probably, yeah.
Probably John what?
that seconded it.
I probably, yeah.
You're on the hook, John.
Well, yeah,
Well, I'd like to
Yeah.
comment that I thought the December 19 minutes were fine with one non-substantive exception. That was that sometime, my name has 3 H's in it. You captured 2 of them.
Oh.
This time.
I apologize.
No, that's okay. There's a silent H. It doesn't, a J-O-N, so instead of J-O-H-N.
Yeah, I'm getting into
Just,
that nasty habit.
Yeah, it's,
I apologize.
like, no apology, it's sort of quirky. In fact,
but other than that, as
other
amended.
than that, fine.
do
I
have-
will recommend, I will make a motion to recommend approval of December 19 minutes, unchanged.
No, as amended.
I need to amend
As amended,
the Jay's
yeah.
presence there.
Yeah, that's right.
And the adjournment.
And, yeah.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor of approving the December 19th meeting
Aye.
minutes as amended?
Aye.
And aye. All right, January 9th? Do we have any discussion on January 9th? You want, what did I have, both the January 9th ones?
So this was a very extended discussion about definitions and capital funding,
Okay?
of which I
Do-
captured
I thought you, yeah,
a
you,
meaningful portion, but
yeah, no, no, you captured,
You can always go back to the tape.
Yeah.
I think it, yeah, no, I think it's,
That's fine.
yeah, I thought it was, so do I have a motion on the January 9th meeting minutes?
I make a motion to approve the January 9th meeting.
Do we need to change the spelling of your name in this one anywhere? So are you
What does it
okay?
matter, yeah?
Okay. All right, so we have Jay seconding that motion, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we've approved meeting minutes,
good.
so
Thank
we
you.
can move beyond that. I'm sorry I didn't realize that you were going to be around next week, otherwise I would have bumped a set for March 23rd, which is between the schools and the public hearing. Actually, it's between the last presentations and the public hearing, that Monday night to do a review. I would have set it for next week, but I didn't think you were going to be here. So I can't set it for Monday now. So we did say that we might want to leave a Monday night open so that, or available to
Yeah.
just decompress before we get to the public hearing. If people want to do that, I'm happy to schedule that meeting on March 23rd. It's a Monday night.
Can I interject on that?
You can.
So I have wrote the substance of the Finance Committee letter for the town warrant. I have it with, John reviewed it, Terry reviewed it, I just wanted them to do a first pass, and then I'll get it out to everybody. What needs to get in that is I have some assumptions about what our deliberations will lead to, but I really need everybody's input into that, because that's a big part of what I want to put into this letter. So this meeting becomes important for that. That letter is due the day after our deliberations, so I will have,
Day after the public hearing.
yeah, so the Thursday, the 29th.
It's due the day after that?
Yeah, she said it's due the day after. So,
Sure.
so be that as it may, that will be very helpful to me. If we can get some good thoughts there, I can put them in and then.
Right, then I'll just set the agenda that night to be, to review and prepare the Finance Committee letter.
Yeah.
Or
That's a good idea.
and then that way, part of our review process will give you whatever information you need to do that. But I don't quite know. I'm sorry, Heather, is it, we really have to have the letter to you the day after the public hearing? The Finance Committee letter for printing in the warrant, is that when that's due?
Yeah, here, let me pull up the calendar.
The final version of the warrant was the printer on Monday, April 6th. So
Oh, all right, because she's saying she wanted it the 27th.
Oh, so we got another week.
Yeah, so that's basically,
another week.
Okay.
Gonna put it all together.
yeah, so she doesn't want us to take too long with it, so certainly,
Yeah.
but we should have a good idea of our recommendations the
Yeah.
night of the public hearing.
When are we planning to review the warrant?
I had that question too. When are we going to get
The
the
warrant is not final, when's the warrant?
Closed until the 16th.
Okay, do we have any information about any articles that are not standard?
That have financial impact.
The Library Board of Trustees, I know, wants to talk about, and they're actually, I think I told him that he could, the night of the public hearing, he could come and talk about, and you would know this from being at the Board of Selectmen meeting, that they were going to be talking about
Trust funds.
trust,
funds.
yeah, and who's managing that, and how they're managing, and changing the way, but is there anything else that we know about?
Let's see, that would have a financial impact. The Green Communities, they're meeting with the selectmen on Tuesday. They're looking to two options, like we've discussed before, to pay Unitil to convert the streetlights to LED,
Okay,
or purchase them outright from Unitil and go for a grant to convert them to LED.
okay,
Another financial impact, Historical Commission is looking to, for support from the board to put forth the Community Preservation Act, the CPA. So that would,
Wow.
That's got a tax impact.
yes.
that's significant, yeah.
So they're coming on Tuesday night to the Board of Selectmen's meeting,
This next Tuesday night?
this coming Tuesday. the
So,
10th.
all right, so basically, I'm gonna recommend, because I don't, are they gonna have a lot of time to this on Tuesday night?
For the Historical Commission?
Yeah.
I
Are they
guess-
5 minutes between, like animals and stuff?
Yeah, we run over sometimes on our, 5-minute appointments, but
Yeah.
I would expect at least.
Well, no, I guess I'm just gonna suggest that we pay attention to that, and then that way, if we have questions that we wanna make sure we ask by the time they come, the night of the public hearing. Are they gonna have a public hearing?
For the CPA?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. And I'm trying to think, the
To
last
answer your
night,
question, it's at the beginning of the meeting, under the appointments, that
And
To
what
meeting-
date is
the meeting with
meeting?
this-
I'm sorry,
Tuesday.
Tuesday, okay.
Is it possible, well, maybe, all right, so the night of the 19th, we hear from the administrative offices, we hear from debt, we hear about debt. We hear,
I think.
do we hear the sewer that
The
night?
sewer is that night.
I don't know if
They
that would leave
switched
us any
with
time to
PAC.
hear the
They were
Historical
supposed to
Society.
be- Originally, they were supposed to come tonight. They wanted to wait until the night PAC came.
Okay, yeah, I was just trying to think if there was a way to have the Historical Society present earlier than the public hearing, but maybe we just have to hear them on the public hearing. If we hear sewer, sewer goes long usually, too. Does anybody, is there a preference on the board in terms of the CPA hearing about that prior to the public hearing, or do you want to wait for the public hearing?
I think I'll go back and, I know we have it in the email somewhere, the document that's got it all written up. We read that like a year and a half ago. I know what I'm trying to say, it's kind of late. Right, so.
The schedule for hearings?
No, I'm talking about the CPA, no, the Conservation Preservation Act. Was it planning that wrote something up about that?
No, this
We haven't
is,
considered this in quite some time.
yeah, no, we
Yeah,
haven't,
years ago.
Yeah, but didn't as a board, we read something about it?
Okay, so during the open space plan, I think that was where the CPA had been discussed as something that if we were participating, we would have been eligible
Yeah.
to have some type of access to grants. So you might be thinking about that.
I am, and we got a
Okay.
document at that time, so.
But the last time this came to town meeting was quite a long time ago.
Yeah, I don't think I lived here yet.
I think I could tell you that the driving factor behind the Historical Society doing this is the back and forth on the old primary property.
Okay,
The chair of that committee made those comments 3.5 years ago when I tried to put an article through to demolish that building, that's what we should have been doing rather than just putting money up to demolish the building. It's taken her 3 years to get to it, but I applaud her for doing it.
okay.
I think we need to hear it. Obviously, if we can shorten it by all tuning into the selectmen's meeting on Tuesday and then
Yeah, and then if there is a need for it,
not
maybe we can-
requiring the full presentation when we meet, but just a Q&A, I think that would be a wise use of everybody's time. if
I
we're
think
looking
you're
at it
right.
From that approach.
I think the Green Communities presentation is going to be one that we should really hear the entire presentation from the committee. They've done, it's been a long time coming, there's been a lot of work put into it, and there are two very different options.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, we have limited meeting opportunities over the course of the next month. And, the director of the library presented on Tuesday night at the Board of Selectmen meeting.
Right.
I think he said everything he needs to say. We will probably have a couple of questions, but I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think it necessitates having him and.
No, especially since
Not
it's
not
on,
that he gave a extended presentation, but,
It was thorough.
yeah, and I don't think we need that. Like, if you watch the meeting,
right, yeah. So
available
just
to
go back
everybody on YouTube.
Right.
No, we
Which,
just
by the way,
Q&A.
which I forgot to announce that this meeting was being recorded and telecast over the Lunenburg Public Access Cable Channel.
delete the
That changes everything.
We could take that snippet and move it to the front of the tape, right?
Well, I'm just going to tell you now, so anything you've said has been recorded, and you are just, okay. I was about to forget something. All right.
Before I forget, one other financial impact article. The selectmen will be meeting in executive session about the 635 Mass Ave property.
So we won't
In front
know
of the public
anything.
safety building.
Right. So we won't know anything until next week about whether or not there's any.
Whether an article will be put forth on
Okay.
that.
Well, thank you. So we're not approaching 30 yet? Articles? No, not yet.
We're up to you, I think,
They're up to you? Oof,
and not quite.
okay.
I just want to point out one thing while I'm up here. When we were talking about new growth, after we got the estimate, the revised estimate from RRG, I included, and you'll see it in my slide about the tax rate impact, adjusted future years new growth to 200,000.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Great.
I have no other financial updates, with the exception of one that Karen and I have been talking, and she's working on reviewing the overlay account. So we may be able to adjust that account down.
Okay.
But
And that would be good.
give a further update on that next week.
Super. I'm sorry, John, were you going to say
No,
something?
no,
Okay.
Trying to absorb stuff at 9:30 at night.
It's hard. All right, so with that, do we have any public comment from anybody in the public? Do we have any public comment from anybody on the committee?
We doing committee reports?
Oh, sure, let's do committee reports. Sure, you can. Do you
Okay.
have one?
I do. The school committee met last week. I was, as you know, out of town, but I did watch the meeting on YouTube. And I don't want to, obviously, they're going to be here next week, so I won't go into any significant detail, but they did do a budget update, and there were some small line transfers that they conducted over the course of their meeting. But that original 6.57% increase that the superintendent first was looking at, that number has shrunk to 2.9 over a lot of the substantial savings that occurred, mostly due to health insurance and a bunch of other things. The principal difference from a spend to not to spend is the one vice principal position and some other supply lines and those kinds of things. But the school committee did basically endorse the idea of, remember we had a discussion about we would like the superintendent's presentation to us to reflect the collective support of the school committee. And they effectively supported that 2.9% increase.
Okay.
So we can expect them to come in with a number that is different than the town manager's 2.5.
Okay. Any other committee
I
reports?
love it when she nods, because it means I think I got it right.
Okay. If there's nothing else, then next week, we have the public schools and we have the DPW. And then, so the week after that, I did not change it on the schedule, but I will, that the sewer committee will be presenting on March 19th. And then March 23rd, we'll try to schedule a meeting, but we'll have to figure out where to have it, because we won't be able to have it here,
Yeah,
because it'll
yeah.
be a Monday night.
Monday night, sure.
With that, I'd be more than happy to accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you, good night.
All right, well, that's that.